Good evening. Welcome, everyone. This is Wednesday, September 21st, and it's a regular meeting of the Scarborough Town Council starting at 5:30. Call this meeting to order, and if you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. Councilor Johnson will be remote this evening, so we'll be doing roll call votes for everything. And Tony, would you help me with the roll call?
Councilor Sider. Here. Councilor Anderson.
Here.
Here.
Katarina. Here. Councilor Johnson.
Here.
Councilor P.
Here.
And Chairman Pucci.
Here.
All present. Thank you.
We're also being joined by the planning board this evening. I'd like to give them an chance to introduce themselves. Chairman Hendrickson, would you take it away?
Yes, I'm Rachel Hendrickson, Chair of the Planning Board.
Karen Shoup.
Roger Bealing.
Rick Monking, Vice Chair.
And we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Next is item 4, general public comments. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on something that is not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none in person and none online, we'll move on to the approval of minutes from our September 7th, 2022 regular town council meeting. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Any discussion? And would you call the roll, please?
Councilor Sider.
Yes.
Councilor Anderson.
Yes.
Councilor Hamel.
Yes.
Councilor Katarina.
Yes.
Councilor Johnson.
Yes.
Councilor
Yes.
and Chairman Pucci.
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Does anybody have any adjustments to the agenda that they would like to propose? Seeing none, I signed the treasurer's warrants prior to the meeting today. And item 8 is our town manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It took me my stride here for some reason.
I know you thought you were starting in an hour and a half.
I thought I had another hour and a half to prepare this. So let me turn my mic on. Quickly, by way of recruitments, I'm pleased to announce that we have extended an offer for a very seasoned public works director who's worked his whole professional career in the greater Portland area, someone that we have worked with as a colleague. And so I'll hold back on naming his name until we finalize all the details, but very pleased to announce that. With respect to the finance director, I've kind of reported my ongoing challenge there. Continues to be a challenge. I do credit Liam Gallagher for really being creative and trying to switch up our recruitment techniques. And so far, so good. We do have some new prospects that we're considering. And so I'll continue to keep you abreast of that very important position. As regards our comprehensive plan, this is a matter that the council dealt with in quite some detail. And it's been many months sitting at the state waiting for approval. Part of that delay was caused with the transition from Jay Chase, but not too much. There's essentially one individual at the state that is responsible for reviewing all comprehensive plans in the state. So very slow in providing feedback. I'll also just as an aside mention, you might recall our approach was a bit different than normal comprehensive plans in terms of its layout and format. And so it doesn't fit perfectly well in kind of the checkbox that, you know, does it meet all of these requirements? So Karen Martin and other staff have been working with the state reviewer to provide the additional information and direct them as to where the various pieces of information are. We did get confirmation that they looked at it, looks good, and we should get some official notification. We're hopeful in the next couple of weeks. So just pleased to provide that update. With respect to EcoMaine, both Chairman Clucci and myself serve on the board of directors. EcoMaine, we are a member community. We share, get, I guess, favorable tipping fees as a result of that, but we also assume some of the landfill closure costs and the like. There's some liabilities that come with it. Nonetheless, top-notch organization and one that's really important to our community and other member communities. They are going through, all summer, they've been going through a planned, pretty major shutdown of the turbine. Every 6 or 7 to 10 years, they actually remove it, take it offline, ship it out across country for total retooling. They did detect some additional work that need to be done. This stuff is not cheap, and further delays have caused some other cash flow issues with the operation, but it does look as though they'll have the refurbished machinery back in place and operational by sometime very early in October. So things are moving forward. With respect to Avenue 2, this is a matter back in 2018, prior council had worked at the request of a landowner in the Pine Point area and a butter to Avenue 2 and agreed to discontinue. This was a street that essentially from King Street to the water's edge to the ocean. We really we had no fantasy of ever building a road in that area, but it serves a very major public purpose by way of providing public access to the beach. So in negotiations, as part of that process, we did negotiate back an easement, 10-foot easement, and work is underway as we speak in terms of relocating the path within that easement area. Now, Councillor Hamel, formerly as a private resident, interested party, was quite involved in that matter, and a number of councillors have expressed interest in attending a site walk that I'll coordinate. Last two items, quickly, the property tax freeze program is the one you heard in some detail from the assessor. As of today, we have qualified 1,133 applicants. I think the assessor estimated as much as 1,500 applicants might be eligible, so we shall see. It clearly has slowed down, but it's still consistent. I believe we're taking applications and can qualify folks up into December 1st. So this will be an ongoing process in the fall. And lastly, I guess this is a bit of a pet peeve of mine since I've been manager. The islands on Route 1 just below us, kind of extending all the way to Higas Parkway. For any of you that have traveled along Route 1, I'm sure you all do, you've noticed the condition of those islands is really deplorable in terms of weeds. A big part of that is our organic policy, frankly. Historically, we used to use herbicides and pesticides to control weeds, which is a very common practice within the right of way. But for over 10 years now, we don't use that, and we've tried all sorts of organic products with really not much success. And so, like many of our other challenges, it really becomes quite labor intensive. So this summer, we really haven't given it any attention. You perhaps have noticed on the way in tonight, they started some work today. I was very pleased to see it, just cleaning up the weeds. And this is a longer range project that we have in our capital improvement project, which will be we call it a greening initiative, but it's really removing the asphalt material within the median areas, working with landscape architects and engineers. I think there'll be some stormwater treatment that we would like to do there, but really improve that section of Route 1. After all, Route 1 is essentially our main street. It might as well be aesthetically pleasing as it can be, and actually provide hopefully some stormwater management and treatment at the same time. So I just wanted to acknowledge the work and effort on part of the Public Works crew. I'm quite sure I wasn't, they weren't pleased with my request because it's not fun work for them, but I do appreciate it, and it looks very good. So please take notice. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm available for questions.
Very good. Any questions for Tom? Councilor Anderson.
Yeah, Tom, just a question. You made it sound like you don't anticipate for the comp plan significant edits from the state, but if we did for some reason get something procedurally, would we just vote on those amendments, or how would that work?
Yeah, it would come down to the nature of them. If there are substantive changes, yes, certainly we would come back and seek additional action on part of council. But so far, I believe we've been able to satisfy their inquiries with no substantive changes. It's really directing them where to find the information that they're seeking.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Caterina.
Yeah, Mr. Hall, quick question on that property tax freeze, that 1,133, those are 1,133 residences that will have property taxes frozen.
Yes.
What's the total number of residences in the town? More or less?
Residential property taxpayers, about 80. Is it 10,000?
Parcels.
Yeah.
I'm correct.
That's
Yeah.
residential and commercial. Yeah.
That's, I believe it's about, just over 8,000 residential properties.
And the reason I ask is I have a legislative policy committee meeting tomorrow, and that's one of the things
Oh,
I
good.
want to talk about at municipal, main municipal. And then my other quick, it's just a comment on the medians
Mhm.
and pesticides, being unknown and pesticides with the bees. Have we looked at planting them in such a way that it chokes out weeds, because that can be done?
Yes, I think that's part of the greening initiative. We don't have a design yet, but I think we're going to be looking
Right.
for native species that are hardy. Just appreciate that those medians will take all sorts of salt, sand, and
Right.
road grime, everything else that comes at them. So it's going to be,
So brown
and
cover
we've
stuff.
got some experience elsewhere in town. We've done
Right.
things over the last 10 years or so that have kind of an experiment for us. So we've learned some things.
I just want to bring that up.
Yep.
That's it.
Seeing no further questions, I'll move on to order number 22-087 is a 5:30 public hearing of the Scarborough Town Council and Planning Board for preliminary review of a contract zone application submitted by the Maine National Guard with action by the Scarborough Town Council. To introduce the process, this is defined in our ordinance. An applicant is able to apply for a contract zone. And we start that process with staff determining the application is complete, which they have done, and our initial meeting between the town council and the planning board. We start this meeting with a presentation by the applicant, and then we'll have comments from town staff if they have any. And then we'll have comments from members of the public if they have any. The applicant will then be allowed to respond or rebut some of the feedback that they've been given. And then there'll be a discussion amongst the planning board and town council, which could include questions of either staff or the applicant, and comments from the planning board about any land use implications that they may see. And if we're prepared, we will then issue the applicant guidance on whether to proceed through the contract zoning process or to withdraw the request, or to amend it and resubmit. So that's it in a nutshell. It sounds really complicated, but I'm hoping that we can do it somewhat efficiently. Jan is here from, I'm sorry, are you with the Maine National Guard?
I am with me,
Okay,
a civilian state worker.
So-
yes.
so I'm going to pass it off to you to start with the presentation.
All right, thank you very much. Hi, my name's Jan Spencer, and I guess you could call me the master planner. I am the director of special military projects for Camp Keys for our planning and programming office. I'd like to introduce you to the individuals that we have here tonight so that if you have questions, you'll know who they represent from our organization. And again, I'm Jan Spencer, and then my direct supervisor, Captain Larrabee, is here. He's in the front row. We have Major McDonald. He represents the Air National Guard. Captain Larrabee's with the Maine Army National Guard, just so I make that clear. We have Mr. Ralph Turner. He's from our engineering department. He's handling our project that is on the Saco side that we've just broken ground on. So we wanted him here tonight in case you had any questions as how those projects intertwine. And then we have Mr. Andrew Flint. He's from our environmental section. He is the director. He's here in the audience. So if you have any questions concerning that side of the house, we're definitely here to help you out in any way we can. I'm just going to talk briefly why we're putting this contract zone application in is because we have a project that we'll be putting in called the Southern Maine Readiness Center, which would be adjacent to our field maintenance shop one. You'll hear us call it FMS one. Also, if there's any acronyms that you see within the document, the military is famous for having an acronym for just about everything. So please feel free to ask us to clarify anything that you see on that documentation. We have up here an aerial site of our land and the new roadway where you will access our property, which is on the Saco side of the property. That's Eastview Parkway. And that comes off, of course, Route 1. We do not own this section here. There's going to be some a storage company is going to be moving into here. And I think on the Scarborough side, you guys have something submitted for an HVAC company or something to that effect which would be next to this house here. And then, of course, our property goes all the way out to the Salt Marsh area. We own 24.6 acres on the Scarborough side and 27 acres on the Saco side. A couple of points that we want to bring up is everything, all access for town, anything for electrical, sewer, everything would be accessed from the Saco side. So those are some quick, just overall views where we would not be tapping into the services for the Scarborough side. We did bring some photographs of some of our facilities to give you an idea of what we would build if we were to get this. This is our brand new Joint Force headquarters in the far photograph. That's a new facility in Augusta that they finished several years ago. And I think Captain Larrabee will be presenting and answering any questions on some of the other facilities that we have and what they look like. We are putting in the contract zone application because we would probably have to do that, which we just finished the process for Saco, because towns just really don't put in where you can zone for a military facility, where we can just walk into a town and put a facility in. We used to have a facility in Saco, but we did sell that back to their city, which it's a community center. And again, Captain Larrabee will talk more about that, but our buildings do have a life. And once they reach a certain point, the federal government stops supporting them. So that's why we build new facilities. We got rid of our facility in Portland, which is now part of the University of New England. And the field maintenance shop that's being built will be to replace the field maintenance shop that was on the backside of the Portland Armory. And so this one that we just broke ground, which should be completed in about 2 years, and we'll be moving the federal technicians. They wear uniforms, but they work as a federal employee when they come down here to work. And then the facility that we're looking to build for Scarborough would be an Air National Guard, Army National Guard Readiness Center, which is the majority is what you would call an administrative building for the individuals. If you have questions of what the individuals would be doing, the Air National Guard and the Army National Guard, the representatives here today can answer those questions for you. And again, if you have any environmental questions today, please feel free to ask Mr. Andrew Blint right here. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Captain Larrabee. If you have any more questions for me, I did work on the contract zone application itself. So if there's something within this document you have a question on, something we've omitted or you need clarification on, please feel free to ask me and I'll be happy to come up and answer any questions. Captain Larrabee?
Thank you, Jan. Good afternoon or good evening, whatever you consider it. I'm Captain Larrabee from the Department of Facilities Engineering from the Main Guard. I'd just like to speak a few words regarding some of the benefits that a National Guard unit, Air or Army, could provide to your town. So it's a quick statement, just noting that we've always had a history in Southern Maine, pretty much from the start of the state's history, caring for our local populace, as well as responding to what's needed for either emergency services, on the other side of our border, domestic or foreign, supporting potential war efforts. I would note that the significance of the Southern Armory or Readiness Center does allow for training and quick deployment for our military members within Southern Maine and throughout the state if needed for emergency response, such as flooding and such. And the position we had here is relatively strategic and gone through years of planning to select a site that is southern as well as in rough proximity to I-95, 295 for main avenues of maneuver. And this will allow us to train in different aspects to meet our state mission, as well as meet federal requirements when needed. And I have a few documents to bring up. I can provide them to the panel if needed for further review, but looking through some of our records when looking over the Saco thing, I did come across some correspondence from the mayor at the time from 1956 to the general at the time, General Carter. And it just kind of signifies some of the
links between the community and the military for a National Guard unit. As the mayor here, Mr. Garland, was asking the general at the time, General Carter, to possibly pave the facility in Saco on 55 Franklin Street due to its frequent use by the local community for the many events they had, as it was meeting a large mess and not providing them the access they would need. It just speaks to the frequency and the importance of an armory at the time, as well as the correspondence from the general regarding to see what they could do for the town to make that happen on our facility. And I found that quite interesting, just to note that, at the time, there was a lot of interest in, say, sports training and school events, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts activities, as well as various, say, expos for like home shows and automotive shows, for lack of a synonym at the time. But it brings up just some of the use of, and I found that quite interesting, just to show some of the relative routes. And as Jan had mentioned, that 55 Franklin Street, about 5 miles from our proposed area, and about a little more than less than 12 miles from where we currently sit, does stand as Saco's community center for the city itself. So it was sold to them. They turned it into an area for the community, just kind of reinforce those roots between the two. And it does segue to what we currently have that regarding our armory rental program, which is where people from the localities can use the space within our facilities for events, as long as they apply, at limited cost for what may be available from other areas. And just when quite convenient on the timing, as our fiscal year does start October 1. So we have from October of 21 to about end of September of 22 here, kind of gave us a span to show what our a similar size or one of our most, I'd say, frequently used ones in Augusta on Western Ave. Just kind of give an idea of what that facility, after it's built, could provide to the town as well. So the large part of that still is sports and sport-related events used by the local community, rather such as Maine Association of Football Officials, refereeing, training and such, and various sports activities such as basketball, baseball, youth softball, twirling, as well as Kennebec lacrosse. Other events that were used for that facility during these winter and springtime, apologies, of this year, it was largely usually as a COVID testing and vaccination site, which was a high populated area at benefit to the local people at no cost to them for not only vaccinations, but as well as testing that was needed. Other events stayed similar to the time. We have a number of events and expos, dittos for kiddos, kind of a clothing and equipment exchange for youth, children, and teenagers, from my understanding, as well as craft fairs, holistic fairs, auto parts shows, sports and gun shows, working with the Travis DeMille Foundations for one of their events, Boy Scout Pinewood Derby, as well as a rock mineral expo. Other things, they had numerous veterans and elderly and health related things, such as Project Healing Waters, which seems to be a veterans outreach for fly fishing to help with wounded warriors. Successful Aging Expo, as well as other main health events and other related organizational training meetings such as Life Flight, Land Surveyor and Auctioneer Examination Holding, Kennebec Valley Boards of Realtor training, as well as safety care training and similar type events. So additionally, assigned soldiers and airmen will live, travel, and train throughout the local area and state, providing local expenditures to possibly economic booms to the local community, relating retail and food service during training that is held in the area during drilling and annual training, hotel accommodations to support fatigue management for those who have to travel into the facility from a specific mileage away, as people tend to drill from various locations throughout the state. Home purchases for the various full-time staff who would like to work there full-time for long durations, and other various economic impacts. Some of the examples I came up with was one related to our field maintenance shop out of Portland. I inquired what their credit card swipes on a local go out and have to buy something immediately on the economy. They had about little under 13,000 just local credit card swipes for things they needed in emergency for job purchases and mechanical repair. I didn't have the Air Guards data, but I assume that'd be equivalent, and I'm pretty sure that a local auto parts store would not shrug at about $26,000 in additional income. Other things, as we have soldiers who train, we also have to feed them. And based on the expected strength there, I'm additionally vague, as I'd rather not say our intended strength on publicly operational security. We would look at between the Air and Army, if I did the numbers right, about $92,000 to feed them between contracted catered meals or food that is prepared for them. Again, big benefit to the local community, as well as the money they would spend coming from their medium to high paying jobs from those who work there full time or those who would be occupying for drill assemblies and annual training. Another benefit we have would go to that is either what previously we would refer to as community projects, we now call it Innovative Readiness Training, or IRT. As Jan said, we have acronyms for everything. And what those are projects that the engineering side, Army has some, Air Guard has some, we have engineers stationed there in the squadron. You can speak more to that. I can probably speak more to the Army side if needed. I'm part of the 133rd Engineer Battalion, but it provides us an opportunity to do, say, training in our particular military occupational skills or MOSs at limited cost to whoever we're working for in the point of contact, either say an authorized entity that is approved by Congress or likely towns and city municipalities. That is no cost regarding equipment or personnel, only materials to them. So largely we can do community projects that are a great benefit to cities that they may not get done otherwise because they may not be able to afford them. A few examples we have regarding scouts and youth camps. Camp Bombazine, Camp Nutter are largely Boy Scouts. The Air Guard did Camp William Hines a few years ago. And Camp Susan Curtis was a recent one on a youth camp down in Casco Bay area. Some community projects, a little more lower scale, but areas we've done things pretty much all over the state. Waterville, Skowhegan, Sanford, many up in the county, some in Senegat, Caribou, Hodgson, and Holton. Senegat was an interesting one. That was a 3-year project for a very large multi-purpose sports field at the Wisdom High School. We had to raise that like 30 feet of fill in some areas. I was there, so I know some. It came out really nice for them, and I believe I haven't been up there in a few years, but they really did appreciate the effort we did there. Raymond and the elementary school areas, Augusta, various trails, bridges, and hiking areas. And Wood Island in Kittery was probably our more logistically challenging one, as we did a life-saving station and renovation of a seawall on the Wood Island. So we were actually working on an island. We had to have the materials, all our heavy equipment, and the personnel all moved out on boats and barges. It was quite the undertaking, and was a very big thing to see, like our hydraulic excavators operating on an island. But they came out really nice. The point of contact out there really appreciated all the work we did, and it probably saved that historical facility for them. So we did start for a 2-year absence due to COVID in East Millinocket. We're clearing an area, and the relevance of that may not be large from here, but we did have Senator Collins stop by, took a little screenshot from her Twitter posting. She was in the area, stopped by, and appreciated what the soldiers were doing. So these do draw a fair bit of attention to the community and the local politicians. Regarding not just community projects, we also have, as mentioned a little bit earlier, or at least alluded to, emergency response missions. As part of the Guards, we are there to respond in the emergencies that arise, usually say in weather-related disasters. Not so much in Maine, since the ice storm of '98. Jan's husband, Ron, was one who did respond to that and helps get the people the best care they could, powers up, and meals delivered. I think you mentioned.
Water bottles.
I was only a teenager at the time, but if you're in your 30s, you probably remember that. Other things we've gone out of other local ones, we had flooding response in Sanford, as well as some areas up in northern Maine in the Presque Isle and Fort Kent areas, I believe. Other ones out of state, we were doing hurricane relief in Vermont for Hurricane Irene when it really destroyed their road networks out there. The 262 and I think a few other engineering units went down there to help with that, as well as a few units mobilized down to Louisiana to help in Katrina back in the early 2000s. Other ones more recent, we had snowstorm support. We was Operation Big Dig in Massachusetts when they got hit by that really hard wet snowstorm a few years ago, as well as mentioned during our community support, the COVID-19 state support, helping out MEMA with their logistics movements, hospital support, as well as various testing sites throughout the state. as well as most recently, we had a short notice mobilization to support the inauguration sport in 2021. We had a very short notice and we were able to get, I think, 3 of our Army companies down there in a very short notice, and they did a very good job. So those are some of the short notice impacts we've had regarding the more environmental or weather disasters that the Guard can support, and a modern facility in Scarborough would be a likely hub should the local populace or we need a position to work out of in the southern Maine area. So regarding other things, we are largely environmentally and energy conscious. We are, sorry, a little bit ahead of myself. I just got excited. Our buildings for new construction are at a minimum leadership in energy and environmental design, or LEED Silver. One of the facilities we have got to LEED Platinum. Don't ask me the difference. I couldn't say off the top of my head. Perhaps Ralph can assist with how that's scored. But it's something we aim for to make sure we're making conscious environmental considerations in the buildings, as they will be a minimum of a 50-year lifespan. We want to ensure that they are not only environmentally conscious, but also energy sufficient. We use solar, combined heat and power, geothermal, rainwater collection, and a number of other renewable methods to develop energy efficient buildings and minimal impact on the site locations, as we typically try to meet the ever-changing climate and knowledge how it will impact of our great state, as we tend to have different climate initiatives through the Army, depending on what they're looking for us to accomplish. Our energy manager had done an analysis regarding from 2009 to 2020 regarding our footprint versus our net kilowatt hours. And he came up with that although our footprint had increased about 18% size-wise, our net energy consumption had decreased by the same amount, an 18%. Just notice that as our buildings get old, we upgrade them, we take conscious environmental and energy options to ensure that they run right, to just, try to do our best as we meet our energy and climate initiatives that the Army is looking for us to do. Jan had mentioned that power coming from Saco, so that shouldn't be a draw on the town regarding the, I guess would say the net, which is probably not the right word, but we won't have to impact on your grid. We're also rather self-sufficient, as we tend to contract plowing, landscaping, internal building maintenance, all from either outside or within our DFC work crews. So that shouldn't be a matter you would have to say fund with us or take away from other areas of the town. So we have a few more images just to show regarding some other facilities we have, just to give a comparison visually what we're looking for. So this is the buildings I'm going to show for the first few are from Hooksett, New Hampshire. They took our inspiration for the field maintenance shop in Saco to show there'll be a large professional shaped building, something that the Army and Air Guard will be proud to work out of, and will not be a eyesore. Norm Mishu, who's worked with us, has been very good at giving us buildings the soldiers and airmen can be proud of working out, and will be something the community can be proud of as well. So this is one of our exterior shots. Another from the side. Yep, got the right one. Show a little bit more of a long shot. We have a inside shot just to kind of show what we'd be looking for the interior. So here on the top left, we kind of have a hallway, nice trimmed wood panels. To the lower left, we have kind of a break room area, nice and modern. In the center here, we have kind of a down shot of the maintenance bay areas, large, well lit and well organized. Top right, we have a modern classroom, and the lower right, we could have a specialty bay. I'm not sure which one, but just kind of another shot of our working areas in there. Just have a few more visuals from. This is our Brunswick facility. This is a LEED Platinum, just, say, nice facility, not a sterile brick building similar to what our kind of the block ones we had built in the 40s. Modern, nice landscaping. Just off to the side of that had a row of solar panels vertically down the side of the wall, and off in the motor pool we have another set of them in the overhead storage area for a few of our longer vehicles. So nice modern facilities. And just our last one is another shot of the Joint Force headquarters, another, which is just slightly out of my reach. Just another shot. Show the kind of buildings we're looking to build and match the best we can. So that's pretty much all my remarks. I'm not sure how to go from here, but if there are further questions, please address them appropriately to the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you all. Next on the agenda is comments from town staff. Tom, do you or staff have anything to add to this?
The only thing I'd say is just kind of a historical reference or context. I know Councilor McGee was on the planning board at the time. Perhaps Councilor Calvarino was around as well. But back in 2014, there was a similar proposal that came forward for contract zone that was subsequently withdrawn between kind of in process, if you will. So this is not a kind of a new project to us. It's just coming back in the same location and obviously needing the same sort of relief and support from the town at this point. I don't know.
2018. Was there something in 2018? But anyway.
We do have our director of planning and senior planner here as well. I'm not sure. Do you have any substantive comments on what they're proposing?
Yeah, sir.
Okay.
We're just here to answer questions. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this proposal? If so, please step up to the podium, state your name and address and what you'd like to say. See no members of the public in person or online that would like to comment on this. So I'll move on to a response from the applicant for what you've heard. Are there any? Okay, very good. Seeing none, it's time for discussion amongst the planning board and town council. Who would like to cue it off? Ms. Henderson.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say, my dad was in the National Guard for 28 years.
Oh, nice.
So I know so much of what you contribute to the community, and I appreciated seeing you at the Downs and the vaccination site. So I know you do good work in the community. As the planning board starts to look at things, we start to look at the environment in which you want to put your buildings. And as I look at this, it appears as though there's a significant wetlands connected with this site. It looks as though, it's not clear to me, as though there's what might be a seasonal stream there. So we really take a hard look at that when you come before if you come before the planning board. We have a real concern about stormwater runoff. We have concern about construction to ensure that the environment is looked after. That when you're done with the construction, there is a full restoration of the land that has been under upheaval for a while. So those are the sort of things I'm going to ask Rick Meinking to speak, because I think I saw his eyebrows go up as you started to talk about energy efficiency.
Putting me on the spot, huh?
So Rick.
Thank you. First of all, for those in uniform, my hat's off to you for your service and appreciate what you do. I'm not totally unfamiliar, spending 11 years at the Navy Reserve Station on Commercial Street. That is now where the research building is that for the ocean research. While the planning board is not our mission is, or our goals are to see that the ordinances are followed as stated. And my colleague referred to some of the issues with the land use. The land use is only one part of the big equation. It's the built environment that is also part of that equation. And I'm pleased to see, and I know firsthand some of the other projects you have done and the efforts you have put into those. And I feel confident in knowing that your goals of sustainable practices and the goal of meshing into our community with a built environment that is responsible. I feel very secure in knowing that that is also your insight and your goals. There probably will be some concern on the last time looking at the literature. It doesn't look like it was in 2019 when you last did when the last wetlands delineation was done. So we'll probably look at you to probably update that just to be sure that the wetlands and any vernal pools that may have been established since then are identified, and we can move forward with ensuring that some of our natural resources are protected as well. That's really all I have. I also would anticipate some sort of vehicle charging for your folks that come in and do the drills and the weekend warriors, as we call them. But I certainly would think that as the goals of not only Scarborough, the state, and federally, we are looking at EVs becoming much more popular than they are right now, and we certainly would like to have the infrastructure to support that. So with that, did I do okay by you, Madam Chair?
Yes, you did.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask either Roger or Karen who wants to say something. Roger, you're all set?
I'm all set.
Karen?
And the only comment I have is I noticed a couple times in the application that you mentioned that the parcel adjacent to Cascade Brook Marsh will not be developed. I don't know if it's not developable or if you're just choosing not to develop. It would be great if we could say, hey, they're not going to develop. They're never going to develop. I don't know if, down the road, 10 years, you're going to suddenly develop that. It would be nice to maybe at this point preserve it. So I don't just saying you're not going to develop it. It would be great to make that concrete and preserve that.
And thank you very much. I think the planning
Thank you. So
board is.
I think we've got the land use implications covered. Any discussion amongst the council?
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Council
Um,
Kettering.
Having seen you guys a couple times in the past when you were here, and then withdrew the applications. I think this is a good move for the town of Scarborough. I have friends who've served in the Guard and whatnot. And I know that having the National Guard and they used to call them the armories back in the day. So I grew up in South Portland. I remember playing basketball or something in the South Portland Armory, but that's going back a ways. Is that it's nice to have you right here. And I'm thinking in the future with climate change and the potential for bad storms, and we're right on the ocean, and it would be helpful. And I'm also aware, because I worked at the vaccination sites myself, volunteered, and it was great seeing National Guardsmen and women also working at them and helping out back with the pandemic. So, I just think it's a positive to have this located where it is. And I supported it in the past too, so I'm not changing anything. I do like though how you're going with the environmental things with the solar, and I agree with Mr. Mind King. But having the EV charging, and again, looking towards the future, since you're looking at a 50-year lifespan for these facilities, so.
Council Anderson.
Well, thank you guys for coming, and again, thank you for your service. I think for me, hearing Captain Larrabee, you talk a little bit about how having this facility really gives back to the community. It was great to hear that, because that didn't come across in the application. So just hearing all of those activities that you guys support when you come into a community sounds really exciting. It was exciting to hear about the community's use of the space. So my question is just, what's the occupancy there, and like how much time will the community actually have access to the facility? Is that something like, is it just weekends? Is it, sporadic based on what's happening operationally?
I'd have to consult with our armory rental point of contact, Mr. Neto, but as we're usually there 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, it's usually open to the public between then.
Okay.
subject to, I guess, who gets there first. I'd have to talk to them a little bit more, but some things we've had at weeks at a time. Sometimes it's once a week, like sports training. Expos on the weekends, we're not drilling there. At least from what I can recall off the top of my head, looking at his calendar for Augusta. So as long as it's enrolled in the Army rental program, I don't see that being a large issue between drilling periods.
That's great. Yeah, we're pretty space poor for programming, so being able to have access to more facilities that we can use, whether people are renting it or whatever you guys have to do to get the access, I think just is great to have that option available to the public.
The National Guard Bureau puts on trainings for master planners and other individuals that work with all our databases, and they visited Maine where they've come to our facility and then stayed at the local hotels. And these are people from all states. And they come here to train for a week and stuff. Those times the facility might be unavailable, but in most times, if the availability is there, that's what we like to be. We're there. That's who the Maine National Guard are. They're Maine citizens. And just as they are soldiers, the facilities are there for the citizens of Maine. So your tax dollars pay for it. So we appreciate that. Every penny. So
My next question is for Tom and maybe Autumn. And I don't mean to put Autumn on the spot as our brand new planner, but just looking at the TVC3 zone, technically we could put a 36,000 square foot hotel there or a municipal building with no limits. You guys are asking for a 40,000 square foot non-municipal building. Why are we suggesting the contract zoning amendment path versus just a general zoning amendment? Is it because TVC3 is in multiple places and there could be impacts, or I'm just curious why we're going down this path versus a simpler
They're
path?
actually in the rural farming. zone.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was gonna point that out.
It's not a ref zone.
They're in
Yes.
rural farming.
Yeah, we are.
Ah, okay, so that makes a big difference.
Yeah, and I should also note, and someone, please correct me if I'm wrong, the actual work that will occur within Scarborough is outdoor containment of vehicles and such, right? The building that you've described is physically located in Saco.
That
Is
is
that correct?
that is the plan at this time. I mean, this project is a number of years out because the way I'm going to call it a MILCOM, but it stands for military construction. We put in for the monies and then it could be 7 years out before the structure is built. Dependent upon all of this is the view that we're looking at right now, that it would be the difficulty of this site is you're in 2 different counties and you're in 2 different, a town and a city. So it's hard to put that building right on that property line, one way or another, and buffers between those areas, even though we own both properties. We know there's, distances that you have to have, but those were questions that's why it's directly on the property line in the picture, because we didn't want to plop it in the middle. But most assuredly, that's where we're looking at putting the building is on the Saco side with the Air National Guard parking up to the right. That would be military parking, and then the Army National Guard also. That's military parking in the back. And then the public parking coming in from the streets on the Saco side.
So I appreciate that those details may change depending on, over time.
We don't see that they would, that those are the plans that we're focusing on here. We like the way this is set up for most of the traffic for our soldiers coming in or the public coming in would be on that side of the building.
Counselor McGee.
Hi, thanks. Last time around, which was a while ago, there was a single family home and an owner there. Have
Yes.
you had any communications, or are they aware that you've brought this project forward again?
I know that the individual who owned the house sold the house. I don't know who the new owner of that home is. I do have that at home, at work, for who was next to our property. But one of the comments, and I was not there, I had just started with the organization, was they wanted a tree line and a buffer in between his property. And on the drawings, we do show that that would be our intentions to, make that as pleasant for that individual. I know his property right next to him, they're supposed to be building an HVAC company. That's very different than a military facility, but we want to do what would be right for that person at that home. So that we took that into consideration when we did the preliminary drawing here they wanted a land buffer and some trees.
And I think just to follow up, the other concern was the lighting, which I'm sure the planning board is more than capable of discussing with you, but I
Yes,
believe you do have some requirements that require lighting at night. Is that correct? And I think that homeowner was specifically concerned with having pretty much
right,
a lit house all night long. So
right,
just some things to consider. The planning board, I'm sure, will walk you through that and
right.
be happy to have you in this community.
I'd like to point out something, if I may, up here on this picture here where our joint board headquarters is. I don't know if you're familiar with Augusta, but right along, you can see the homes. There are homes literally on this tree line right here. And some of this is thinned out, not necessarily by us, but by the homeowners. So we do have homes all along here. There's a home along here. We've never had a complaint from any of our lighting. This is our military parking on the back side. And there are homes all along here, and they're planning on building a large complex. In fact, we just got notification on it, but putting a large housing complex into the back here for extended housing in the city of Augusta. This road takes you up to the cemetery, and then the Comfort Inn is right here. So if you're familiar with Civic Center Drive at all in Augusta, that'll give you an idea of where we are located and what we do with the tree buffers. We do everything we can to keep our neighbors happy, but that's who we serve. So that's all along here, right here. There's probably 6 houses along this road right here. So, I mean, they're not even a road in between. That's in between the tree line. But just to give you an example of what we would work towards.
Yeah, let me just say that at a prior meeting, the planning board, the Jake Brown HVAC was approved.
Oh,
So it
was,
is going
okay.
in there. So you might want to consult with the owners.
Most assuredly, we will contact them. So,
With respect to the lighting, we talked about lead silver. Lead silver is our minimum standard, and that's directed by the National Guard Bureau. It's actually directed by the Department of Defense. And lighting and the interaction between how the lighting is going to affect the community is one of the parts of scoring for lead. So it's how we interact with the community. It's part of how we interact with the community. People think of lead, in terms of energy efficiency or energy conservation or that, but it's really more of a, how do you fit in with the community? There are points for whether or not you're established within an area that has bike paths nearby, and if there's a bus route nearby. And so a lot of those kinds of things will definitely go into it as well. The vehicle maintenance facility that we'll be building first at this location, I will tell you that a vehicle maintenance facility is a very difficult facility to get LEED certified. It isn't something that kind of normally fits in with that. And we have the plan for LEED silver, and that's going to be our approach.
Councilor Snyder.
Thanks. Thank you all for being here. I just want to reiterate or echo what Karen had said. Just from my point of view, I would definitely be looking for an emphasis on minimal impact to that river that runs along the side of the property. Also looking for opportunities to possibly conserve. I don't know what the situation is with the abutters in terms of whether it's all RF or how far back those properties go, but that's something that, where land is at a premium in Scarborough, and we're always looking to put as much into conservation as we possibly can. This is a challenging thing to kind of wrap your head around, considering you are in York County, Cumberland County, in Saco and in Scarborough, to try and visualize what will Scarborough be quote unquote left with versus what is going to belong to Saco at the end of the day. And so, keep being mindful. I'm sure you guys obviously know the situation that you're in, but it is challenging to kind of visualize from our perspective, I think at this point, just what exactly we would be getting on the Scarborough side versus the Saco side. And so I'd be interested to see how the planning board puts you through your paces there.
I did want to bring something up as somebody talked about the vehicle charging units. We are already adding those to our sites. In fact, we have them at our Augusta site now. In fact, it's right outside of our CFMO's office. But we are adding, those are being added to our sites. So if you were curious about those, that is happening.
And to that point, I'll just add that the Adjutant General, the Commissioner of the Department of Defense Veterans and Emergency Management, is an owner of an electric vehicle.
Yes, it is.
So we have an incentive there as well.
Reserve that parking spot.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much for the presentation and coming before us. Appreciate your plans. And thank you for your service. A couple questions. This came up in 2014, I guess, and then it was withdrawn in 2015. Can you give us an understanding of why it was withdrawn then?
I actually can. We had a facility in northern Maine that came back with an engineering report that the roof was going to cave in. And we had to swap our projects from the Southern Maine Readiness Center to the Northern Maine Readiness Center. And we just completed that project. We moved it from Caribou to Presque Isle, and it's right by the airport and the university system there. And we've actually disposed of the old facility. So it wasn't something that we really wanted to do. We wanted to get this project on the board because we had already done the land swap with the university system, and we were in the process of purchasing the land in Scarborough, and we had to come to a screeching halt. So that was one, and then we started the process a little bit forward again, where we would start the Southern Maine Readiness Center towards 2018. I contacted your offices, and the National Guard Bureau picked the field maintenance shop first. So that was going in Saco. So that's why it kind of stopped for a little while again. So that we got approval from the National Guard Bureau and I don't know if it's 20 some million dollars for the field maintenance shop. That, like I said, we just broke ground on. So that's why we're at the mercy of the National Guard Bureau in Washington, DC. So sometimes things come to, and we had to go through congressional approval to swap out the project back in 2014, 2015. That's actually right when I started with organization. And it was tough because everybody who had worked hard for that had to kind of let go of that process. That's why we kind of disappeared for a while. We had to go up north, take care of business. So
Thank you. You have our sympathy for the bureaucratic work that you need to do to make all this happen. So
I'm glad you understand.
I have two other quick questions. One is, so as I understand it, Saco is the maintenance facilities going in, you're breaking ground there in Saco.
Yes.
And on the map here, then the Readiness Center, which is an administration building, is also going to go in Saco.
Yes.
And Scarborough gets the parking lots. And we also get, it looks like you've got some sheds and a waste shed and a hazardous waste shed. So can you tell us a little bit about what the plans are for those? And also you have a spot next to the parking lot, which is indicated for future expansion. Could you speak to what you might be contemplating for that area?
For part of this area here, there may be some runoff from the parking lots
Okay.
where we would have to, it's not a perfect design, so that's why that's there. It would have to be shifted a little bit closer towards that. For the buildings, some of if you talk about like oil and lubricant sheds, that's where they keep their supplies. And for some things, it would be controlled it could be something as simple as these light bulbs.
Okay.
To store those within a building or different things like that. I don't know if you have any more input or,
Well, controlled waste, as Jan mentioned, is kind of a misleading term. Waste could be used light bulbs, it could be contained and stored, used engine oil. It'll be stored in a building until they can properly dispose of it. And as Jan mentioned, the POL shed will just be where they're storing their usable oils and lubricants such as transmission fluids, hydraulic oil, things like that.
Great. And I just have one final question. Why did you have this split over two towns, two parcels over two towns? Was it just the available land and that was the biggest parcel that you were able to put together? Because it seems to me that would be not your first choice, is to try to do this two times.
so if I had raised my hand, I would have said, why are we doing this? But I wasn't working there at the time, but what we had to do for, the National Guard Bureau was we had to come up with a master plan, and the recommendations were that we would build facilities within, along or close to the I-95 corridor for easiest access during emergency situations to assist the communities. And we needed, because we had given up Portland, we really needed a good location. And this really suited us well, that there was a little bit of a buffer that we weren't right on Route 1, but we were back within behind, and then it was enough land because we have requirements for standoff, everything like that, for security reasons. And so this really worked out well for us, that it fell in between two counties and two cities. That was a tough one for us, but both communities we had been involved with over the years in all different manners. So we felt this would be serving two communities.
Right.
So that's why we said, let's go for it. This is
Thanks
a
very much.
good thing.
So the
Thank
only
you.
other thing I'll add to that is that some of the space we're talking about are gonna be warehouses that the Air Force is gonna use. And those, the plans that we have right here are very preliminary. The next step in the process is to really get an A&E out there to do a site study, figure all that stuff out. A lot of the building positions could change based on site conditions. Like for instance, with FMS, it's a lot of clay in that area. If we knew about this beforehand, maybe moving the building over 30 feet, if it works with all the buffer and all the other stuff, maybe that saves us $2 million if we want to do that. So I want to put that disclaimer out there.
Thanks very much.
Sure.
And having just heard Major McDonald speak on the vehicle maintenance facility, it's actually a joint vehicle maintenance facility. So part of that facility is designated for Army National Guard use, and part of it is designated for the Air National Guard use. So this is a joint facility. Then we're starting off with the vehicle maintenance facility, and the rest of it will follow along that same way.
Thank you.
Roger?
Yeah, you had mentioned, you have weekend, training in a couple of weeks every year. Is that ongoing? Your weekend people there every weekend?
No, one weekend a month,
Okay.
one weekend a
Okay.
month. And then the 2-week annual training, and it could be at this facility or it could be at any numerous facilities. We're building a brand new training site in northern Maine that's almost 8,000 acres. And a lot of our soldiers are working up there to build. So, but they train all over. They train at all the armories across the state, but they could be training in Vermont. They could be anywhere, but for their annual trainings. But the weekend drills are usually at the armories, at the readiness centers. They call them readiness centers now.
And how many people will be approximately?
On the weekend drill, for Air Guard.
200-ish. On the
Okay.
air guard side.
We're looking at about slightly less than that for the Army side, about 150-ish. But we would have the full-time staff of the units there, usually 5 days a week on weekdays.
But the weekend drills is when the majority of the people, and that, again, that's usually the first weekend of the month is when they drill, so. Well, the Army, I don't know about there. Same.
So this has been very helpful. I think you've answered all of our questions. I'm a little blown away. What a first-class organization. It looks like you're ready for everything. To pivot on a dime, I grew up in Lewiston. I actually graduated in the Armory there. It was a small Catholic high school. We didn't have, common spaces. So, our basketball team played there. You really were an integral part of the community. And why not be an integral part of two communities? I guess being on the borders, maybe you get double the bang. So the next step in our process is I'm going to offer a motion to approve the contract zone application submitted by the Maine National Guard with action by the town council, and to advise the applicant to continue the process, the request for contract zoning without modifications. I'm going to offer that as a motion. Do I have a
So
second?
moved. Oh, I'm sorry. For a second.
Seconded by Councilor Anderson. Is there any discussion amongst the council? Seeing none, Tony, would you call the roll, please?
Council Sider,
Yes.
Council Anderson.
Yes.
Council Hamel,
Yes.
Council Caterina,
Yes.
Council Johnson,
Yes.
Yes.
and Chairman Clucci.
Yes.
That's unanimous.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much.
I look forward to working with you. And
We do have a quick switch over, so I'd ask.
why don't we take a 2-minute recess and we'll come back for Mercedes. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Moving on to order number 22-088, a 6 p.m. public hearing of the Scarborough Town Council and Planning Board on the proposed amendment 5 to contract zone 5 proposed by Prime Mercedes-Benz on property located at 137 US Route 1 in Scarborough. This is going to be very similar to the joint meeting that we just had. We have representatives from Mercedes-Benz with us. Burke is going to kick us off. Come on up. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Burke Air. I'm with Air Design Group. I'm a civil engineer representing Group 1 Automotive. And just as a point of clarification, Group 1 Automotive purchased Prime Automotive or acquired a bunch of Prime's properties. So this isn't an application by Prime. I don't know if that makes a difference in all the
We'll
paperwork,
update
but on
that.
the application form, it is the owner is Group 1 Automotive now. With me today is Brad Johnson from Group 1 Automotive. Brad is the Director of Construction, and also Cord McLean. Cord's our architect for this project. As I mentioned, I'm the civil engineer. And the Mercedes store on US 1 has been in existence here for about 20 years. This is I believe the contract zoning was created when the store was first built, and it's been amended numerous times. I think the first amendment was right around the time of the construction. And then it's been amended as a couple of extra properties have been added over the years. And the first contract zoning allowed a 24,000 square foot building. The first amendment raised that to 25,000 square feet. The building that's there today is about 27,000 square feet. And we're here to propose two small building additions, one in the front and one in the back, that will total about, that's about 2,000 square foot addition. When you add everything together with existing mezzanine and everything, I just made an even 30,000 square feet in our application. So, but we're proposing about a 2,200 square foot addition. The purpose of the addition is to update the image of the showroom and to improve our customer experience and the way customers buy cars now, and the way customers have their car service has changed through the years, and we need to, continually update, provide, newer, nicer restrooms, better lounge areas, just a cleaner, more open floor plan instead of carved up into more offices. So as part of this renovation, no part of the building will get closer to any of the property lines. There's just a little part where the service drive is that gets extended back a little bit. If you'll, I believe we have a site plan in your package. And that would be sheet.
I'm not sure if we have a terrific image. Liam's going to try to put something up here. Is that helpful?
That is not ours. It's that one. Yes. A001.
Yeah, I beg your pardon. That those graphics just didn't make it in the packet. I think they
Okay.
have paper copies. We didn't.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry I didn't bring a bigger one, but this page, the blue in the back is the bigger edition, and then a small blue in the front is a small edition. So as you know, Mercedes-Benz, the luxury brand automobile, and Mercedes, as all car manufacturers, has certain image requirements, and those image requirements don't exactly fit with the architectural requirements that are in your ordinance. The existing building out there doesn't quite meet your ordinance today. There's some materials on the building that wouldn't be allowed, such as ephes, and the brands don't generally like the peaked roofs, and they want a lot of glass. So we've worked hard with Mercedes to get an approval of the elevations that you see in your packet, and to add a peaked roof, which wouldn't normally be accepted by Mercedes, and to try to compromise and give the Mercedes brand the image that they require us to have, and then also try to fit that to the building that's there today, and also with your architectural ordinance and requirements. And so Cord can speak more to that as we get further along, if you guys have questions about that. But there are elevations, color elevations included in the packet that show what the building will look like. And it's an attractive building, I think, today. And I think what we're proposing to it is going to make it look even nicer. I don't think it's going to look glaringly modern or, out of character and frankly, not a lot different from the looks today. I think that's just some finishing touches. So I think you'll agree that when you take a look at it, it looks nice. Facility's well maintained. The landscaping is well maintained. It's a clean, nice facility. They sell great cars there. I've heard great feedback about their the customer experience, but I think after we complete this project, it'll be even better. It's really the new plan is pretty nice. Oh, there we go. So there's also, if you want to get into the nuts and bolts of it, there's a floor plan also included in the packet. You can look in to see, that's the existing plan there. That is an existing demo plan that's showing the stuff that we're going to remove. And then there's the proposed plan. So today, the showroom is sort of more on the side. And so we're making the showroom more front and center, which is what you expect when you come in the front. Makes a little more sense of where the front door is, for that to be where the showroom vehicles are located. In the center there and toward the middle, you'll see sales desks, which are just off the showroom floor. And that's the service drive over to the left where the cursor just was. There's no change proposed for the actual service shop. So the service bays where the Sprinters and the cars are worked on. There's no proposed changes there, but the service drive gets extended a little bit. You see the red shaded area in the top up in that area. So service drive will contain 2 more cars indoors so that, there's high-speed roll-up doors on either end. So that's air conditioned space. So it's just another improvement so that less waiting in line and when you go to drop off your car for service, be covered. And then in the back there, you'll see behind the restrooms, there's a tech break room and training area back there, and then some administrative offices. And that little section to the right side is where vehicles are delivered. So you get a new vehicle, that's where you would pick it up. So you guys all go down there and purchase a car, and that's where you pick it up. So really, that's it in a nutshell. I mean, I'm not the world's greatest public speaker, but I'm great at answering questions if you have some. I think this is a small addition to an existing facility. It keeps us staying where we like to be. And, it's really we just like to make buildings just a little bit bigger.
Very well. Thank you. Tom, do you have any comments from staff?
No, I would just say, as was mentioned, this started in 2002, I believe, and it's received a number of amendments through the years. This is one of the most highly regulated contract zones I think we have in town. So much so, it seems as though every time they turn around, they need relief of one sort or another. So it does occur to us that this is a de minimis change given the existing footprint and activity. We do know that there's a existing neighborhood right behind here that we work with the past owners, and I'm sure we'll work with the new owners in terms of being good neighbors to all those folks behind as well.
Staff, you're all good? Okay. Any comments from the members of the public? Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak to this item? If so, step up to the podium and state your name and address. And we have one online, or somebody's hand is up. Oh,
Carly, you should be able to speak. If you want to mute yourself.
Hi.
Carly, we can.
Hi, so we just live right behind the dealership, and I don't think our concern is the space, but it's the construction noise, and I don't know if now would be the time to discuss that or.
I think it's fair game. It's a concern of yours and you brought it to our attention. I think it's totally appropriate.
So it's the noise I know would be during the day. I think it's the disposal of materials too at night, because there's already quite a bit of noise from dumpsters and tow trucks at night. And just kind of wondering how this is going to kind of build on that.
Thank you for joining. Any other members of the public that would like to add comments? Okay, seeing none, do you have any response to how you might intend to address any of those concerns?
We can restrict hours of construction. That's something we normally do on projects, especially on projects that are, so close to, residential area. And we actually received a comment from town staff about that the town had received a complaint about dumpsters being picked up very early in the morning. We spoke to our operations folks, and they said they asked that vendor to please come later. And so we've made that request, and if that continues to be a problem, that's something we keep working on and getting them, it's a vendor, so we don't 100% have control over their schedule, but we can choose another vendor if necessary, so.
Right.
We do have some level of control over that. And for the construction, there will be some noise during construction. I don't think it's going to be brutal. Most of this happens inside. So, I think we'll just have to do our best to minimize that.
We'll definitely be mindful during construction, but thankfully, in these two small expansions that we're asking for, there won't be a ton of noise. Most of it's contained within the walls.
Now we'll move on to a discussion between the town council and planning.
Those mics close enough to them.
So.
I think so.
Okay.
So last time we kicked it off with Rachel. Would you like to kick off this one for us?
Sure. In terms of land use, I guess it looks as though impermeable surface is being replaced by a different sort of impermeable surface. So while there's an addition that's going on, it's not going to, we would hope, change anything to do with runoff or stormwater. It's still all the impermeable surface. I would suggest that if this goes through, at some point you're coming before the planning board. And one of the things that we'll be looking at is lighting, because this is an area that's close to a neighborhood. And let me just simply caution you that while these designs look really good, these new ones, it's the role of the planning board to look at these in excruciating detail to make sure that they do meet all of the ordinances. So these are not cast in concrete. In other words, if the point at which you come to us, you are going to have to defend these design changes to ensure that they do meet our ordinances.
Thank you, Rachel.
Rick?
Any other comments?
No, I don't. I just look at it. I mean, they were before the planning board not too long ago to do some exterior modifications. And the front area was included in that, and we approved it at that time. And it looks like you're just doing some infill of the footprint that you have. So the comments that Chairman Henderson said, we will look at, but I don't, from my perspective on the planning board, I don't see where this would be, something that we couldn't deal with.
Okay. Any comments from counselors? Ms. Riggi?
Yeah, so this might be dangerous, but Jean Marie and I were just chatting about how frequently we've seen the applicants, not you in particular, but this is what, the Eighth Amendment or something. And perhaps we as a town council and staff should look at how, because they're an automotive group, they need to be in a contract zone. And whether or not there's some language we can add to contract zones that allow them by majority vote of the council to maybe bypass an amended contract zone and just go through a normal process, because it just seems like such de minimis changes keep coming in front of us, and the process, the hoops that keep jumping through to get these changes is it's kind of staggering, really. So just food for thought down the road that there's got to be something we can do. I mean, if you don't want to codify automotive groups in Scarborough, fine, but there's got to be something we can do that they don't have to keep going through this entire process every time they want to change a sign, you know? So anyways, that's just a thought.
Very good. Councilor Katarina.
Yes, I agree with what Counselor McGee said. And would encourage, us as town council and the ordinance to think about how can we deal, and I know the original intent of this business was we didn't want to be like the Miracle Mile in Saco. But it is a little silly when these businesses who are here have to come and go through the whole contract zone for de minimis, as Ms. Hendrickson said, changes. So that's our issue, but I personally don't see an issue with moving this forward. So.
Councilor Hamel.
Thanks, not to be left out. So 2 of the 3 folks on the ordinance committee have held forth here. So just to make a complete set here, I agree with everything you're saying. So it's not official, but well, yeah, it's a great suggestion. The other thing I'd like to thank the applicants for is not asking us for design input. The last time you did that, it was probably the most painful part of my town council experience. So thanks for not doing that.
Any other councilor feedback? Yeah, I agree with you guys that we don't allow auto dealerships in town yet. We have a handful of them and they're all beautiful. But every time you want to change anything, you need to amend your contract zone, which is a very cost intensive process and time consuming for everybody. So if there's a better way to work it, I am all ears. But that's not what we're here to do today. We're here to opine on whether you can proceed with the rules as they exist today. So with that, I'm going to move approval of the proposed amendment to Amendment 5 to Contract Zone 5, proposed by Group 1 Automotive on property located at 137 US Route 1 Scarborough to advise the applicant to continue to process a request for contract zoning without modifications.
I second that.
Is there any discussion amongst the council? Seeing none, Cody, would you call the roll, please?
Either,
Yes.
Counselor Henderson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor McGee,
Yes.
and Chairman Pucci.
Yes.
That's unanimous.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. We look forward to working with you again.
Thank you.
And our work is done here.
Yes, and now the planning board is dismissed. We have 4 minutes before our regular meeting starts. So are we going to reconfigure anything? Good to see you guys.
More informal session as you'll see. So do you want to recess for?
That's what I was, so I'm sorry. So we're going to recess for 4 minutes and we'll reconvene at 7 o'clock. Sorry, welcome back, everybody. Now that I have my mic on, I'll reconvene this meeting. We are going to move on to order number 22-050, 7 p.m. public hearing and action on the renewal request for an innkeeper's license from Comfort Inn located at 329 US Route 1. This was tabled from the July 20th, 22 Town Council meeting. To a date certain, we had an update over the past month. I believe it was actually tabled in August as well. So with that, are there any members of the public that would like to speak to this request? And I'm going to introduce Attorney Braun to kick us off.
Good evening, Attorney Greg Braun for Comfort Inn and Suites. Speaking to the point you just made, this matter came before the council approximately 2 or 3 months ago. As you know, it's been an ongoing process. The council set several benchmarks asking the hotel to meet to essentially continue operating in its current capacity. That being as a location where local low-income and indigent individuals have been able to stay with some funding from the Opportunity Alliance. You'll recall that some of those conditions included hiring on-site private security at times and in a capacity that was sufficient and acceptable to the police department. Also working with the Opportunity Alliance to bring on some on-site social workers. We've done that as well. I think generally the packet that's been submitted to the council tonight is complete, speaks for itself as far as the progress that the hotel has made in the current conditions there. Obviously, the police chief and fire chief can speak more to that, to any specific concerns that anyone on the council may have. I think the significant or most important thing to communicate and just really generally touch on at this time would be that the hotel has developed and has begun implementing what we're terming generally as a transition plan, essentially working and moving from the current use of the hotel, that again being a location that was taking referrals from the Opportunity Alliance, back exclusively to its more historical use, that being short-term stays for guests from the local public. I outlined a several-step process in the submission I made to the council prior to today's meeting. Essentially, what that suggested was that we were going to use a stepped or wave system of providing notice of this termination of use to the guests at the hotel, and trying to do by way of an orderly fashion this transition, where the guests there would be given notice that the program is ending and that they're going to need to seek and obtain new housing options, with the idea being that all guests would be notified and that the business would be vacant, so that necessary repairs and improvements can be made by January 1st of 2023. You might note in that packet or in that plan that I provided that we indicated the first round of notices would be done prior to today's meeting by yesterday, September 20th. I can confirm to the board that that has taken place. And so I can stay here today that we've at least started with the process and that we're moving forward with it. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the council may have, but I'd otherwise just stand on our submissions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to comment on this agenda item? If so, please step up to the podium. Seeing none in person and no one online, I'm going to close the public hearing. And I'm going to actually read the order because the actual motion is a little more involved than what I just read. So I'm going to order number 22-050 is move approval of the renewal request for an innkeeper's license from Comfort Inn located at 329 US Route 1, while providing rooms for temporary housing with the following conditions. First is the provision of continuous on-site security in a form that is satisfactory to the police chief, and an on-site licensed social services coordinator must be provided Monday through Friday, 8 hours per day, to provide general support services such as medical, food, transportation, and other needs for the individuals, families being provided temporary housing. And in the event the police chief and fire chief agree that the inn is generating calls for public safety services that causes unreasonable or undue burden on public safety, then at the discretion of the chiefs, the license may be brought back to the town council for a suspension or revocation hearing regarding the innkeeper's license. I'll offer that as a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And motion has been seconded. I believe that Counselor Katerina has an additional amendment.
Yes, I
to
do.
offer.
Thank you very much. I would add as an amendment that we move approval to amend the main motion, excuse me, to add a fourth condition to the innkeeper's license as follows. The town manager shall provide an update and any recommendations to the town council on the status of the license conditions and progress on the transition plan as outlined in a letter from Attorney Gregory Braun dated September 15th, 2022 during town council meetings scheduled on October 19th, November 2nd, November 16th, and December 21st, 2022. In the event that the full transition plan is not implemented by January 1st, 2023, the town manager shall schedule a public hearing for the town council to consider suspension or revocation of the innkeeper's license.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
And discussion on the amendment. Counselor Katerina.
Yeah, very quickly, just so to inform the public, there've been some ongoing meetings with all the members involved in this process from the various stakeholders. And at our last meeting, which was last week, we did come to the recognizing that the owner of the hotel does want to transition back to a hotel. So we want to make it as much of a win-win as we can. I know it's not a win to put people on the street. We're hoping to avoid that, but it's very difficult, as everyone knows, in this economy. So one of the reasons way back when that I made I wanted to be part of what we had as policy was having professional social workers on board. And now that these folks are on board, we came to the conclusion that it would make sense to do a transition so that people know what's happening and when, so it's less chaotic. We don't have a lot of legal to-dos with, evictions. Well, there has to be an eviction process, but if it came to just a straight revocation of the license, then it would be a whole different ball of wax. There could be going to Superior Court. There could be, whatever. So this seemed like a win-win solution on the part of all parties. So I'm hopeful that my fellow counselors will accept this amendment and move forward for an orderly transition of the Comfort Inn.
Counselor Anderson.
I just want to say, I'm really glad that this amendment came forward, and I think the word orderly that you just mentioned, I think is critical for this, to do it right, to do it well, to one, give the public awareness of what's going to happen and when, but also the current residents that are there, the opportunity to search for other housing. So I think it's a really good path forward, and thanks to everybody who worked to kind of come up with that solution, because I think the community will appreciate it, and I think the residents hopefully will appreciate it as well.
Any other comments on the proposed amendment? Seeing that, thank you for working on that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, Counselor Johnson.
Well, it's really not a comment on the amendment. It's a comment in general. So should I wait till we get back to the full motion?
Yeah, why don't you wait till we get back to put it on the floor.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you, Jean Marie and Counselor Hamel, for, I know you've had several meetings with various stakeholder groups, including the police and fire departments and representatives of a number of different organizations to try to come up with what the best solution was for all parties involved. And I know it wasn't easy, and it's not going to be easy, and we're going to get frequent updates, but I thank you for bringing this amendment forward. Tody, would you call the roll, please?
Counselor Scyther?
Yes.
Counselor Anderson?
Yes.
Counselor Hamel?
Yes.
Counselor Katerina?
Yes.
Counselor Johnson?
Yes.
Counselor McGee?
Yes.
Chairman Clucci?
Yes.
Amendment passes. Thank you.
So now we're back to the main motion as amended. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Johnson.
Yes. I read the transition plan. What is our attorney present?
No.
Oh, that's a good one. Was our attorney involved in this transition plan?
Not in the formation of it, but in the formation of the motion to really assure consistent compliance and updates to the public and the council.
Okay, are there any performance guarantees in each step of this transition plan? So I mean, it's supposed to be a third by so date, another third by another date, another third by another date. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a very low threshold of confidence in that. So what kind of performance guarantees are in there? Because we all know where we live. We live in the state of Maine. You come October, you can't get anybody out anywhere. So how do we know this is just not a delay?
There are no guarantees, but as the motion, the condition that was just approved suggests, I will be providing 4 updates to you before the endpoint, and you'll be getting a sense. I suspect there may not be perfect compliance with each and every step, but the goal, and I think the ultimate performance requirement has to do with full compliance by no later than the end of the calendar year.
Okay.
In which case, and I should say the word is shall, I will schedule a suspension or revocation hearing upon that development.
And if you would like me, council member, just to speak briefly to that point, really the largest unknown here from our perspective is sort of the court calendars and what it might take as far as resources to follow through with any indetermined steps on our point. But that's why, in fact, that we've scheduled, I count out 4, I believe it is, check-ins with the council between now and the end of the year. And while I didn't state it, we certainly do support Council Member Katarina's amendment, which has just passed. We have no issue with that, and we appreciate, in fact, the ability of the council to bring this back before them for consideration and to essentially hold us to the obligations that we're outlining here. And just again, to speak to your point, I can say that at least as to step 1, we've already succeeded in doing that. So I hope that on its own is a positive indication.
Any other discussion?
I'm not quite done yet.
Go ahead, Ken.
I understand we started rolling out the first wave, but also the reality of it is the vouchers started ending in September, so there wasn't really a choice. I was wondering, is our police chief available? Because I'm curious as to the progress, because I understand the amendment motion by Jean Marie, but we've also already done this 5 times. So adding, 5 more times that's good. We're pretty generous, but I'm not seeing any improvement. And I was wondering about the police chief, because if you remember on August 15th, our town council meeting, our police chief gave us an update. And the update from August 1 to August 15th, there were 68 police calls to that hotel in a 15-day period. And I was just wondering where we were now, because it seems to me like things are getting worse.
Councilor Johnson, we have the police chief here and he's at the podium.
Good evening. For the total calls for service for the month of August, we were at 57. And like I briefed the council on August 17th, we expected the calls for service to increase compared to what we have seen in late spring and early summer. And we expected that to increase because we were trying to get voluntary compliance, not only from the membership at the hotel, but also the ownership at the hotel, so that they felt good about calling the police department, about reporting things to the on-site security through Polaris Security. And we've seen that. We've seen good compliance from Polaris Security. They're reporting on a daily basis to our special enforcement team. And we do have those counselors on site as well, the 2 full-time counselors, which will make an impact at some point in this process. And like I said, in August, it won't be an overnight solution on the police end of things. It's going to take some time to see the impact.
Thank you, sir.
Just if I could, the other suggestion or comment by the counselor, I believe the funding is been extended through March of 2023. So the funding continues beyond what has been discussed before this council in months past. That's really a decision at the federal level, but there is funding that will extend at least into March of 2023.
And I can confirm that. And in fact, this isn't a financial decision as far as the funding being cut off and no longer being available. Rather, this is the understanding that this was always intended to be a temporary plan. This is an emergency funding program. And clearly the board and the town has made it clear that there needs to be some end in sight. And so working with the town, trying to develop a plan that is stepped and not just immediate. We hope that this is going to reduce any strain or burden on the town and certainly reduce any unnecessary unpleasantness on the guests.
Counselor Johnson, are you okay now?
No, but I'll defer the rest. I'll yield back my time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Counselor Hamel.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Gene, Councilor Katarina and I participated with Lieutenant Tim Barker, Chief Condellan, and other members of the fire department and the public safety department, along with representatives from Opportunity Alliance, along with the social services individuals who've been posted. So I think we've gone to great efforts to try to get our arms around some basic understanding of the situation that we're in. And I think the last meeting that took place on last Wednesday, there was a consensus that this seemed to be the best approach, and it was the initiative of the council, the legal counsel for the owner of the hotel, that they wanted to go in this direction, and we thought this was probably the best, most humane way we could proceed forward with an orderly transition. And bear in mind, there were people on the council who at one point in time wanted us just to shut the thing down the first time we heard it. So I'm glad we didn't decide to do that. And that we took additional time to try to get our arms around the situation. We realized longer term, it's not a good solution for anyone. We don't have an answer for the folks that are in this unfortunate situation of finding themselves homeless, but there is more funding available than there was before. And hopefully with time and effort, we'll be able to mitigate some of the impact that the folks are going to have to face finding other housing. So that's kind of what we did. And I can't say it's exactly the Hippocratic oath, first do no harm, but I think we were very clear at the outset. We didn't want to do something rash without a better understanding of the problem. And I think this is probably the best we can do given what we know at the moment, and recognizing there's a lot more work to be done.
Counselor Seiler.
Thank you. This has been a really challenging topic and subject for us. It is indicated by the fact that we tabled it multiple times. I have been an advocate of taking our time on this to make sure that we didn't have any unintended consequences or rash decision-making happening, that we would be able to manage the situation in a way that was acceptable to the town and respectful of the residents who are here all the time. And also, with the understanding that people who are making a hotel a short-term residence are also residents of our town. And I felt like we had an obligation to take care of them as well. And so I appreciate so much the work that went into coming up with a transition plan. I want to thank Jean Marie and Dawn for serving on those committees and getting this to a position that I feel like I can support. And I hope that this transition plan gives the residents the time that they need to make future plans for themselves.
Any other comments from the council? Okay, seeing none, I'll just reiterate that, thank you to Councilor Hamel and Katarina, and to the applicant for recognizing that there's a possible path forward that hopefully can meet the needs of everybody. I will say, or I wanted to comment that as a hotel owner, the skill set required to operate a hotel and that required to operate a shelter providing these types of services, there's a big gap there. Okay, so and as an operator, you need to understand that early on, hopefully, if you find yourself in this situation again, so that people aren't negatively impacted. With that, I'll call for the roll, please.
Counselor Seiler,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
No.
Counselor McGee
Yes.
and Chairman Clucci.
Yes.
The motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Next is order number 22-075. Public hearing and schedule a second reading on the proposed amendments to chapter 405, the Town of Scarborough zoning ordinance, section 9, 0.1, utility scale solar energy systems. This is coming back to us from the Sustainability Committee. Tom, do you have anybody on staff or April?
Yes, I believe Jamie Fitch
Ah.
is in the audience.
Very good. Thank you, Jamie.
Sure. So just to kind of set the stage a bit, about a year ago, the council approved the town's ordinance update to allow large-scale solar development in Scarborough. There were a few proposed projects that came before planning board. 2 were approved, 2 were kind of tabled because they didn't meet the forestry standards within the solar ordinance. So we were the Sustainability Committee was asked to review the ordinance and kind of take a look at those tree standards and see if there might be a way to modify the language in there so that additional solar projects may be able to move forward in Scarborough. So the Sustainability Committee started working in the spring, looked at other ordinances from around the state, and heard from one of the landowners who's being affected by the current language. And basically, the way the language currently reads is that tree stands shall be conserved. And the word shall in there means we're not going to do anything to existing trees on properties. Although if you look at the definition of conservation, it means wise use of a resource, not using it at all. Just putting that out there. So the Sustainability Committee proposed new language that would require the developer to basically put together or minimize the amount of cutting that they are proposing so that it is only what is necessary to construct, maintain, and operate their solar array. They need to have a revegetation plan that is put together by a qualified individual and approved by the planning board so that any trees that are cut are replaced either upon completion of the array or upon decommissioning. A couple of things I want to point out about this section of our zoning ordinance. It is the only type of development that speaks to any sort of tree cutting. So these large property owners who wish to install solar and can't meet the tree cutting standards, they could subdivide their land to put in roads and parking lots and houses and any sort of other types of development. And solar has no long-term impacts on the landscape. So it's temporary. Yes, they may be cutting trees, but once those systems are decommissioned, the trees could be replanted, as opposed to subdivisions and roads that are once they're there, they're never coming out. The other thing I want to note is that nothing precludes a landowner from cutting any tree on their property currently with all of our ordinances. So a landowner who is planning to install solar could feasibly cut the trees on their property before coming to planning board. And so this is at least giving the town some opportunity to have plans in place so that those trees can be replanted, as opposed to them cutting their trees and coming to planning board, getting their approvals 30 to 50 years when that system's decommissioned. They won't be required to replace those trees. So those are kind of the high points. I'm happy to answer questions. I know there's members from the Sustainability Committee here this evening who plan to speak as well, and obviously members of the public as well.
Thank you, Ms. Fitch. Are there any members of well, first off, are there any questions for Jamie? Okay. Then I'll continue with the public hearing. There are members of the public that would like to speak to this item. If so, please come on up. State your name and address and what you'd like to say.
Hello, Allison Bristol, 6 Bayview Avenue. I just wanted to reiterate the comments that I've made previously at the July Town Council and the August Planning Board meeting on this subject. First, I'm not opposed to utility scale solar developments when cited appropriately, such as in unbuildable landfills. I am opposed to allowing solar farms to be sited in residential areas, no matter how they are zoned, and also opposed to revising an ordinance to accommodate one or two proposed projects that didn't meet adopted performance standards. As I understand it, these projects entail land lease agreements and correct me if I'm wrong, versus the personal use of the property owner, and solar energy lease agreements between these private property owners and solar energy companies in search of site locations. These leases offer no benefit to the town of Scarborough or its taxpayers, as does the Echo Main site, for example. The argument that the utility scale solar section of the zoning ordinance is the only one that limits cutting trees for development is flawed. Jamie's July 15th memo states that solar farm development has minimal long-term impact on the landscape, unlike residential or commercial development. Solar farms are commercial development, nothing less than commercial power plants, and the cutting down of mature trees has long-term impact. And just as an example, a study published in the journal Science reports that tree planting has the potential to be, quote, overwhelmingly more powerful than all other climate change solutions. In July, the Biden administration announced the U.S. government aims to plant over 1 billion trees, setting aside $100 million this year alone for reforestation. Also in July, the New York Times reported on the World Economic Forum's global initiative to plant 1 trillion trees by 2030 to combat climate change, also reporting that 15 billion trees are clear cut annually for a net loss of 10 billion each year. Let's not contribute to the problem, even in a small way, by clearing trees in the name of another sustainability solution. While the solar farm zoning provisions are under review, I also asked the council, the ordinance committee, and the sustainability committee to rethink the RF overlay by location versus parcel size. As I've mentioned previously, in 2021, the Maine Audubon launched its renewable energy siting GIS mapping system based on siting principles developed by Maine Audubon biologists and ecologists to provide developers and decision makers with a resource on where best to site solar and land-based wind projects to avoid or minimize negative impact to important wildlife habits. In Scarborough, about 95% of land east of Route 1 and about 80% of land east of I-95 were designated by Maine Audubon as areas to be avoided. Trees as a climate change solution matter, as does not allowing utility scale solar farm development in residential areas. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any other members? Please come on up.
Hi, my name is Greg Roscher. I'm a project developer at New Leaf Energy. We've been partnering with Ralph Larry on the Larry Farm Solar Project, which has essentially become a case study in this process. Before Ralph comes up to talk about the property, I just wanted to mention a few solar specific points. By steering away from fossil fuels, our project would prevent the same amount of carbon dioxide emissions as over 3,000 acres of dense forest would absorb annually. Our project would be located on what is currently a very low density 10-acre footprint. So there is a net climate benefit by at least a factor of 300 times. While deforestation is a real concern globally, we found it important to point out the irony of this land use being the only one to be facing an effective ban on tree clearing. I just have a few quick points. We believe that the scope of this issue is narrow for two reasons. There is a finite amount of interconnection capacity on the Scarborough substations. There is a limit to how much solar can actually be attached to the grid here. There's also really only a handful of parcels in town that are even feasible for solar. I took a look around all of the parcels large enough, and obviously it's a very wet town. There's wetlands everywhere, and there's really only a handful that makes sense. And the requirement for the vegetation management plans that's proposed in the ordinance amendment that can allow for ecological benefits to the property In the case of our project, a registered landscape architect put together a plan for a robust variety of new plantings surrounding the project. He suggested that the plan would vastly improve sunlight conditions, favoring improved growth for both mature trees and lower strata plants along the forest edges. This combined with the use of pollinator seed, as well as the requirement to restore the property to forest at the pre-construction density. This ordinance amendment appears to strike a balance that paves the way for responsibly sited solar projects. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Ralph Larry, and my wife and I own the Larry Farm at 720 US Route 1. My family is in support of the updated utility scale solar ordinance recommended by the Sustainability Committee and the balance it creates between conserving forested areas and allowing for solar development. I realize that there are individuals that are concerned with the cutting down of a single tree, but over the last 5 decades, our family has regularly cut trees, as is our right, throughout our forest to ensure its health and continued existence. We call this a harvest, and this harvest ensures our compliance with the guidelines of a managed forest. In our case, we perform periodic harvests to maintain the commitments made in our forest management plan with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, an agency of the United States Department of Agriculture that provides technical assistance to farmers and other private landowners. So there are times where cutting trees in a forest are necessary to sustain the forest. I believe that the Sustainability Committee has recommended a revised utility scale solar ordinance that will represent another example where this is also true. I do want to point out, as already was pointed out, that before making the ordinance change recommendation, the Sustainability Committee reviewed the current solar ordinances of the towns surrounding Scarborough and ensured the checks and balances needed for vegetation removal during construction and revegetation requirements upon decommissioning were incorporated. I just want to remind everybody, as you've heard previously also, that utility scale solar development has minimum long-term effect on the town landscape, as it is and will be reversible at decommissioning. The revised ordinance states that at decommission, the area must be revegetated to the same density of forest prior to the solar development. So why am I standing here promoting a revision in the solar ordinance? This is why. The Larry Farm, which is comprised of roughly 75 acres of forest and over 20 acres of working agricultural property, has been in our family since the mid-1800s. I made a promise to my grandmother, Marguerite Larry, a school teacher who taught in Scarborough for almost 50 years, that I would do everything in my power to keep the farm whole and in the family. It's taken me over 2 decades since my grandmother's passing to resolve the ownership and sustainability strategy for the property, and solar is key. I'm committed to keeping the Larry Farm as a farm, but while farming operations only cover less than 20% of the property taxes, they keep the property alive and active. There are no other income streams other than from tree harvests every 20 to 25 years, which will not sustain the property. We need a revenue stream that will not deter the character of the property or the town. The income from the proposed utility scale solar project on our property will require 10 acres of forest in the middle of a managed forest to be cleared. This represents roughly 11% of our property, but this will enable our family to maintain the remaining 65 acres of forest and the entire property. not to mention allow our organic farmers to continue farming the remaining 20+ acres. So yes, this is personal, but we believe that this ordinance revision will enable our goals and intentions to enhance the character of the town, which we all can enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, Nina McKee, 309 Black Point Road. And just quickly, today in the Portland Press Herald, there's an editorial about solar panels, and it was quite interesting to me that there's a solar farms being put in on the highway, along the highway. And as I recall reading the zoning, I think it says there has to be a minimum of 25 acres. I might be wrong in that. And also, I think when these solar panels go in a field, I think it would be too bad to have it in residential areas. So it's kind of interesting to think about the highway, just to have them all along the highway. That would be lovely. So that's it. But it is an interesting editorial.
Thank you, ma'am. Seeing no further public comment, I'll close the public hearing. Come on up.
Good evening, Rick Meinking. I'm the chair of the Sustainability Committee, and we were tasked with the initial drafting of this, as you know. And we always kept in mind what is, the idea of do no harm. And we originally thought that the language we used was the best, but we received further information and getting a little more involved with some of the other ordinances that have been crafted around the state. We feel like this is what we're terming as smart growth. And we're all concerned with growth here in Scarborough. And this, to me, strikes a balance between growth that could happen on this land and responsible growth. Also, I want to point out that Scarborough is part of Maine, and Maine has goals in our renewable portfolio standards in raising the capability and the generation capacity. And so this is another way that Scarborough is fitting into the state's plans. And so I would just consider, at some point we have to understand that there's going to be disagreement between ideas of, losing the value of a tree and harvesting renewable energy and having a protection that there is a way to go back to the state it was in. I think we have to agree to disagree sometimes. But the Sustainability Committee really feels like this is a responsible ordinance, and the change in the ordinance will ensure that future growth in that renewable technology will be done smartly here in Scarborough. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now seeing no more further public comment, I'm going to close the public hearing. And do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
And open for discussion. Counselor Johnson.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, this is my favorite subject. And I know I'm speaking into the wind because this is the yes council. But you got to remember, just the facts of this case is 420,000 square feet is going to be clear cut just by the applicant. And this is the only applicant that's running into this problem, to my understanding. And the rationale that I just heard from our sustainability group is appalling to me. That, it's the whataboutism that we hear in the national forum now. Well, what about if they did a development? They can cut the land. What about this? What about, I don't understand. I'm not gonna support it, but I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure to let everybody know clear cut the land before you come to the planning board, town of Scarborough. Because that's the message I got.
If I can make a point, this is only a public hearing and you're scheduling the second reading for October 5th.
Thank you. I'm glad you got that out, Ken. So would you like to withdraw your motion? Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, okay.
Go ahead, withdraw it.
Oh, we're gonna, no, we're back.
Oh,
We're
wait.
scheduling a second reading.
We're scheduling a second.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so discussion's open. We're just not approving it today.
We're getting confused.
I am. It's been a long day. Any other discussion? Yeah, I thank you for coming, Mr. Larry. I feel we need more people like you in Scarborough, and thank you for trying to save your farm and not for building houses on it. I have a ton of respect for that. So appreciate you sharing your story with us. With that, I'll call the roll, please.
Counselor Seither,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson.
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Johnson,
No,
Counselor McGee,
Yes.
and Chairman Clucci.
Yes.
So the second reading will be scheduled for October 5th.
Thank you for clarifying. Next is order number 22-089, a 7 p.m. public hearing and action on the following new request for a combined massage establishment / massage therapist license for Sun Yudsi doing business as Scarborough Therapy located at 605 US Route 1 and Jennifer Magliozzi doing business as Radiant Skincare located at 89 Mussey Road. Tody?
If I could also address the following one, because they're kind of related. These are new applications. This is the time that we send out for renewals for our massage therapy licensing because they expire the end of this month. And we found a couple of that needed to be brought forward because we did not have a license. So the first one here, order 22089, they brought in their applications, we've done all the vetting of the application, the SBI check. So we would recommend that these be approved. And then in the following one, it's the same scenario. We found that they needed to have licenses and we took care of it. We brought them forward. They submitted their applications and we've done the SBI checks and vetted the application. We recommend approval. So.
Very good.
You get address both at the same time.
I appreciate that. We're going to try to be efficient here. Any members of the public that would like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and do I have a motion? for
So
approval?
moved.
Second?
Discussion? All right, seeing none, Tony, would you call the roll, please?
Counselor Seither,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
yes,
Counselor McGee,
Yes.
and Chairman Clucci.
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Order number 22-090, 7 p.m. public hearing and action on the following new request for a massage establishment license from Scarborough Family Chiropractic located at 20 Black Point Road and massage therapist licenses from Georgia Adams, Jocelyn Fletcher, Jessica Lauren, Tierney McCarver, and Alicia McSmith Sellers, practicing at Scarborough Family Chiropractic located at 20 Black Point Road. And the clerk has already introduced this. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And discussion? Tony, would you call the roll, please?
Counselor Seither,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson.
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
yes,
Counselor McGee.
Yes.
And Chairman Clucci. That's
Yes,
unanimous. Thank you.
thank you. Next, there's no new business. I'm going to move on to new business. Order number 22-091 is first reading and schedule a public hearing and second reading on the proposed amendments to Chapter 413, the Town of Scarborough Growth Management Ordinance. And I'm bringing this forward, although it certainly wasn't in a vacuum. We spent an awful lot of time this year vetting proposals and applications to allow a certain type of development that we don't allow by right, primarily multifamily and mixed use. When we introduced the revised growth management ordinance, we included an allowance for these types of dwelling units. Particularly in the Crossroads Plan development, we allowed 104 non-specific dwelling units to be created in the 7 months that followed, or 6 months that followed passage of the ordinance. We also allowed 75 one-bedroom units to be created that wouldn't count against the cap in the ordinance. The allowance for Scarborough Downs expired at the end of last year. The allowance for the one bedrooms expires at the end of this year. So I'm consolidating it with a very simple amendment that I'm going to say originated with the conversation that Councilor Hamel and I had. I don't want to entertain any more council exemptions this year. I feel like this is a reasonable amount of growth to allow in this next 3 years for a combination of projects. We're not necessarily picking which ones are going to win here, but the ones that are serious and go through planning would. And then it's going to buy us some time to take a closer, deeper dive into the growth management ordinance, which I think is needed. And I think there's support of the council, but it's also very difficult to do while you have applicants investing and spending money to follow the laws that are on the books today. So that is the intention here, is to one, allow a reasonable amount of development that we know is low impact in the next 3 years. But then also, and I think I'd like to work with Councilor Anderson on this, probably come forward at second reading, should we get that far, with a separate action, really charging the council to take a deep dive into the GMO and understand what revisions and their impacts, and set a timetable for how we do that. So that's what I am proposing. And are there any members of the public that would like to speak to this item?
Richard Hayes, 21 Martin Avenue. I'm concerned that this appears to be another accommodation for the Downs. This council spent an enormous amount of time developing the GMO with a lot of exceptions that were talked about. And I believe the chair sponsored many of those and made reference to the accommodations for the Downs. I've also heard that this is a minor exemption and a question about how many votes of the council it takes to pass this. This is an exemption. And if an exemption takes a supermajority, whether it's little, big, or in between, it should take a supermajority of the council vote. I don't understand the gamesmanship that appears to be being brought forward to accommodate the Downs again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Nina McKee, 309 Black Point Road. As I understand it, the GMO says that every year there could be 44 units built by a developer. And as I look at the GMO, I think there are 11 exemptions. And my concern is if you grant this exemption, that's what it is, what about other developers? I mean, is that really fair? And I just think that if the GMO says 44, then it should be 44. But I'm not a fan of the Downs, so I mean, that's just what I feel. So thank you.
Good evening, Noah Nygren, 16 Phillip Street. This is public comment 6. Who knows how many I'm going to get to. I do not concur with the proposed GMO revisions. This appears to be an attempt to pass the GMO exemption with 4 votes instead of 5, and without proving an overwhelming net benefit to the public. We, the 2/3 of this public, which is ironically the supermajority, responded in the survey that the pace of growth is too fast or way too fast within single and multifamily housing. Worse yet, the GMO exemption and enterprise contract zone are a net detriment to the public. I do not care about anything that keeps getting advertised and repeated in all of these packets as a public benefit or lack thereof. All I want is less crowd. Desirable towns are not crowded because crowd is not desirable. We can't stop growth, but I believe we can slow it to the bare minimum. As I said at Council Corner Live, I do not think this town should change. I'd prefer to preserve what we have for as long as possible. And now I'd like to provide my own proposed revisions to the GMO. Under Section 6, exemptions, keep lines 6A and 6B. Delete all other built-in exemptions. That is lines 6C through 6K. I want folks pulling permits so that we sell out of them as soon as possible. This will allow us to finally bring the pace of growth to the appropriate figure of around 144 growth units per year. Growth is growth, and affordable and workforce housing has become a target for developers to exploit, and households with below median incomes still have lives. They still do a lot of the things that everybody else does, and this still contributes to the nuisance competition for space. Under Section 7, admin, delete line 2A. I would prefer that up to 100% of units are single-family homes. Revise Section 7.c.3. We have 144 growth units per year that we have to put somewhere. So limit common schemes to no more than 30% in limited growth areas, but then no more than something like 60% in growth areas, perhaps for X years. I guess more work would be needed so others can still build, but emptying the pool is what I'm after here. It is an actual benefit to the public because then the pace of growth will be managed like for once. And even as these locations like the Downs, for example, they'll get nuked with 86 units per year, but still the pace of growth in town could be 144. Section 8, periodic review, delete 105% or more of the mean number of growth permits. I want our moving average to remain at 144 or even begin to decrease if we see a housing decline and growth permits are not selling out for a few years. We should lock in potentially that decline. I request the town does not support this agenda item. I also request the chair adjudicates my GMO changes, deletes his GMO changes, and takes it back to first reading. The town deserves many, many years of the appropriate 144 growth units per year, especially after the 5 unwanted years of 400 to 500 units per year. Thank you for your valuable time and consideration. I'll be back.
Thank you, sir.
Put the mic.
Thank you for
next to
returning
me.
that.
Allison Bristol, 6 Bayview Avenue, and now I'm really confused in how this agenda item was introduced, that it's about the GMO, where, again, my read on it is that it's really about the negotiation with the Downs. And just as a member of the public trying to follow it, very complicated. In March, the council authorized Mr. Hall to begin negotiations with the Downs, offering up GMO exemptions over 5 years. I think that number was 400 and some odd exemptions. Then 4 months later, in July, the goalpost was moved to 860 dwelling units over 10 years, 40% of which could be 3-bedroom apartments, and allowed for up to 300 certificates of occupancy a year. At the last council meeting, the Downs brought forth a new proposal to 289 dwelling units, but was unwilling to withdraw its previous application for 860 units. And now the town and council leadership appear to be willing to forego negotiations altogether by simply amending the numbers in the GMO. So I would say apparently negotiations are not going well, with no evidence that Crossroads Holdings and the Downs is acting in good faith with the town. I would have the same question: that does simply changing the number in the GMO eliminate the need for public benefit, and also eliminate the need for a supermajority vote by the council? In considering this, I remind the council and town leadership to keep in mind that according to the town's community survey, the most significant issue facing Scarborough in the next 5 years is growth, cited as number 1 by 73% of survey respondents. And I asked the council and the town leadership to go back to the negotiating table, keeping Scarborough taxpayer concerns in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Come on.
My name is Jim Fitzpatrick, 8 Front Runner Way at the Downs. My wife Charlotte. I hear a lot about growth, and unfortunately, 2 of us have added to your growth because we've just moved here from Ospey, New Hampshire, and one of the main reasons we moved, or we decided on the Downs, was the idea of having a town center and the fact that a significant portion of the Downs was going to be for seniors. I see a lot of seniors in here, and it seems to me that, and particularly affordable housing for seniors and assisted living for seniors. Now, I'm not here to talk about seniors per se, but it just seems to me from some of the stats that I said, and I just dug this out of the town today, the Downs Progress Report update reported to the council on a credit enhancement agreement. I had to learn what that was. September 7, 2022. And I was really, first of all, I'm impressed with the development. I mean, we've lived in 8 different towns we've been married 60 years. And in this town, we've been here now almost a year. And everything is so close. Just amazing. I could walk to the golf course. I could almost walk to my medical facilities. But the work that's being done at the Downs just seems to me to be high level and in no excess crowding. I mean, obviously, some of the lots are smaller than anything we've ever had in our lives. But it just seems to me that the developers have really taken the time to do something well, very well. We first looked about 3 years ago, and the housing that was available then wasn't exactly to what we wanted. And so we continued to see the progress and understand what the whole idea of the concept of this. And the idea of the town center sold us. Having a town center, having something that we could walk to, that we could actually, hopefully there's going to be drugstores and in a supermarket and in a restaurant that we don't have to get in the car and drive to. The thing that really struck me in these documentations, this is not costing the town anything. The revenue, there's only 30 kids. I couldn't believe it. There's more dogs than there are kids in the Down. 30 children, for God's sakes. That's certainly not going to add to the tax burden of the town. So I wasn't sure what all this was about tonight, and I understand people who have lived here all their lives. We've been here less than a year. But it's a beautiful town. It's going to grow. I mean, you're right outside of Portland. It's a suburb and it's going to grow. The key is responsible growth. And it just seems to me that these developers have done a great job of being responsible to the way they're developing the Downs. So we just decided we'll go on record to say we like what's going on. I don't know any of the stats on the exemption, but I do know that in order to develop the town center, you've got to have people, you got to have people living there. And it's going to be open to the public. There's not going to be gates, I don't think, saying that the public can't come and use the town center. And my daughter just reminded me today, they happen to live in Scarborough, that that one of the things, and I'm not sure where this stands and what it's all about, but there's a significant need for a community center and maybe even arenas for kids to play hockey or volleyball, whatever, I don't know. And apparently the developers are willing to participate in that. I got to learn more about it. I don't know anything about it right now, but it just seems to me they're headed in the right direction, that they've done a good job. And I think that they ought to be afforded this opportunity to have the exemption. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Welcome to town. Any other members of the public that would like to speak?
I don't know if I can follow that. My name is John Rice. I live at 167 Scarborough Downs Road, right around the corner from you. I'm a little self-conscious that you said, look at the seniors that are there. I thought you were looking at me. But not to put that in too much light, but as I had the opportunity to address the council before, it's a community that it's multi-use and it expands generational touches for people, whether it's a place to live or receive services or walk to work. Or I can't wait to hear the proposal for the golf cart over the Route 1 to go to the golf course. But in all seriousness, and to borrow from Mr. Mind King's comment about responsible growth earlier, and about being responsible about what we do, this is to me definitely a responsible way to harness the growth in our community. Growth is inevitable. You spoke to the farm. I applaud Mr. Leary as well about keeping his farm alive. That's almost a pipe dream these days. And while he's just getting encroached upon in our community, it's very difficult. This is a very specific project in a very specific area that's not taking away from agriculture. It's just responsible growth. I read the comments about the survey, the big survey that went across the town. I too would be concerned about answering some of those questions, not having enough information. And I think if we had information about the growth that was more public, and I'm not placing blame, just the observation. Sure, are you anxious about growth? Yeah, I'm anxious about growth in the town and traffic and the impact on our infrastructure and our community. It's really important. But that being said, if they had more information, they may have checked a different box on that survey ultimately. So I answer out of fear on a survey, but not having all the information to make an educated viewpoint on that. It makes sense to me. It is a way to capitalize. Don't mean that like this is what it's all about, but growth is inevitable. And we can harness this and control this. And I think you've been doing a great job to really evaluate that and look at each of the situations as they come along. So thank you for your efforts.
Thank you, sir. We have one online. Why don't we go online and then we'll come back to you, Art. Bless you.
Melissa, you should be able to speak.
Good evening, Melissa Benarowski. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Thank you. Melissa Benarowski for Hayloft Lane, part of the Downs. And I decided to join the meeting today to give you a different perspective, one of a renting resident. I chose to rent in the Downs before purchasing so I could get a feel for the community that was being built by the development team. I very much was attracted to the idea of the town center. I think it is a phenomenal idea if done properly. I disagree with the previous speaker who mentioned there is no cost to the town because having sat on a city planning board before and town council, I understand the expenses that are engrossed into our public services. And that's a very important thing, I think, to take into consideration. But with that said, growth helps to maintain our cost of living for all residents in the town of Scarborough. So the more development when it's maintained properly, does bring in a greater revenue source for the rest of the residents to maintain our services. What I'd really like to talk about this evening, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity, is when I think of town center, I think of community. I've lived in New England my entire life, in Maine for about 25 years, in southern Maine. And one of the things I enjoy the most about small town New England is community. I moved to this development thinking that's what I would feel and what I would experience. And unfortunately, it's been the complete opposite. And I think it's important for you to hear from a resident of the Downs and understand some frustrations that I feel. I can speak for a large amount of residents, I believe, but I will speak for myself tonight. I think we could be headed in the right direction with this future development. But as in the old saying, good things come to those who wait, I think that is something we need to heed. Growing too fast is not always the best opportunity. Instead, nurture what you have and make it the best it possibly can. If you agree with me that community is important, if you agree with me that we need to take care of what we have before we continue developing, then I encourage you to vote in that manner. I thank you for your time, and to the counselors, if you have any questions or would like to speak with me individually, I believe you have my email address from the login, and I would be more than happy to entertain a conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening, Art Dillon, 180 Black Point Road. You've heard me before. I'm very much in favor of this. We've had a downtown center on the comprehensive plan for a long time, and Planapalooza and all that fun stuff that many of us went through. Downtown center was a goal. We're here ready to make this a downtown center. The developers, they're doing things the right way. Their reputation's on the line. They're homegrown. They want to do it right. It represents them, not just as well as us, the town of Scarborough. I feel it's a smart growth. It's responsible growth. And we do need people to make it a downtown center to get things going. If it's worth doing right, these guys are going to do it right. And with all due diligence, sometimes I think we're letting some politics slow us down. But I thank you for what you do. And again, I'm in support of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Cut the line. Peter Michaud, Crossroads Holdings. We submitted an application for exemption under section 7F of the ordinance back in October 27th of 2021, so nearly a year ago. Our 350 employees, as well as our ownership team, very much appreciates the time and consideration this council has given while reviewing this over the past year. We recognize that our existing application remains pending today. I just want to make a statement that our willingness to withdraw our pending application, our exemption application, excuse me, we're willing to do that provided this current proposal is adopted by the council. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yep. And we have one online.
Denise, you should be able to speak.
Hi, Denise Hamilton, 167 Two Rod Road. One thing people are not raising here that is of great concern to me, and it doesn't even really concern me, is what growth in Scarborough is doing to our schools. We're looking at putting on the ballot next year a new school, a new elementary school, and which would not be ready for several years if passed. And in the meantime, we have all this development going on in town, and we need to look at worst case scenario of every home having at least one child in it and what this is doing to all our classrooms. We're already overcrowded. We have all these homes going in Scarborough Downs. We have these multifamily units going in at the corner of Mussey and Gorham Road. This is going to affect our children's education, and it's really about time that we stop saying no to these developers who want to overgrow Scarborough and affect our children's education. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Seeing no further public comment, I'm going to introduce a motion to schedule a public hearing and a second reading on the proposed amendments to Chapter 413 Town of Scarborough Growth Ordinance Management, Growth Management Ordinance. Is there a second?
Second.
And discussion?
Can I get a point of information? So there were a couple comments tonight about the way that this was put forward, that it wouldn't require a supermajority vote. Can we clarify whether that's the case or not? If this were to move forward as is, by the time it got to second reading, would it still require a supermajority vote or not?
It does not. Ordinance amendments only require the affirmative vote of 4 counselors. And that's dictated by the charter.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I would remind my fellow councilors that regardless of what you think at this point about what this is first hearing. I would like to hear more from the public and move this forward to a second hearing. So I will support this tonight.
Councilor McGee.
So I've got some major concerns about the way this came about. This really does look like, whether it's intentional or not, an end around on the GMO exemption process, and which requires supermajority. Secondly, if we're going to revise our GMO, I think we should be doing a deep dive. And then my third point on that would be, we've had a meeting that introduced the an exemption request. We had no discussion or workshop around it. We had a second meeting that introduced a different request that we had no workshop or discussion regarding it. And what we're here now doing is completely different, which is just a modification of an existing ordinance, which I think deserves a deeper dive and time. And we've talked about it in ordinance, and we're starting to get the wheels turning on maybe looking at some changes for it. This to me seems like a Band-Aid approach at best, and I'm not in favor of moving this forward in its current form.
Councilor Hamel.
Yeah, I have similar feelings. I'm reasonably familiar with the GMO and with the history of the Downs. I was here. It was my, one of the first votes that I had as a counselor was voting on the CEA, the TIF and the CEA for the Downs, 2018. So if someone asked me at this moment, can you please explain the current state of all of the exemptions that are out there from the Downs alone? I would not be able to do that. So the fact that this showed up on an agenda as a single motion and all the backup for it includes a bunch of other pending exemptions is in the least extremely confusing. And at worst, it's like, how could we possibly vote on something that at least 2 or 3 of the counselors don't really understand? So to be fair with John's effort to create another Sarbanes-Oxley or Dodd-Frank, a Kluge-Hamel, piece of legislation. I looked at the number, and I think I liked about it was the lowest number that I'd seen so far from the Downs, but by no means did that indicate that I'd supported this as a motion. And, the fact that it's on the agenda is personally for me an embarrassment. So I think we push the pause button until we get our arms around this thing. We've talked many times about the need to revise the GMO. I do not think that we can move forward without a clear understanding of what a withdrawal is going to be contingent upon our approval of a second motion from the same party. We haven't even had a legal view of that for the council. So I'm not in favor of this moving forward at all. And one of the biggest farces that I've ever seen in terms of my short public life is, well, let's just vote in favor of it to move it along because, we want to see, I'm just going to vote in favor of the process. That is complete malarkey. And I've never seen it happen yet, where something voted in the first reading failed in a second reading. So I better stop there.
Counselor Anderson.
Yeah, I think, I think we have two real policy objectives that we do need to address as a council. The first one being, how do we create more predictable growth for the public so that they understand what the path is for growth in Scarborough. I heard the comment about the survey, and I do disagree that the survey was very clear that growth is a concern. The reason we went with the vendor we went with is because they did benchmarking. So we could see 25% of Scarborough residents were not satisfied with our pace of growth. In the Northeast region, 53% of their residents weren't, and on the national average, it was 44%. So we're still significantly below the national average, and I have a hard time believing that the survey is invalid just because different people have a different view of how they want to interpret the results. So I really don't like when people take this survey and try and twist it into a narrative that suits their belief, when in reality, this was a scientifically valid survey with a national provider who can do benchmarking. So it is valid. There is a problem with growth. We do need to address it as a council. We need to do it strategically, but I also think we do need to give the developers a fair opportunity to grow. And I do think retrospectively, the past year with the GMO, we made a lot of missteps and we need to correct them. And I appreciate Councillor Pucci trying to offer something to advance the conversation and advance the process. However, we've had many conversations on this where we've talked about what the path is forward that we don't seem to follow. In July, when we had the workshop, we talked about doing this as transparently and openly as possible as we can with the public. I don't think we've done that. I don't think we've been able to have a conversation as a body to weigh the pros and cons and figure out how do we address the needs of the public. Councillor Pucci and I did talk about trying to make sure we go forward with a path that allows for council conversation. I still personally feel like we need to have that as a body before we move anything forward, so that we can really align on what our policy objectives are and be strategic about the decisions we want to make so that we can, build the town center, but so that we can also create predictable growth for the public and make sure that we have very clear rules that all developers can follow. I don't feel like this amendment really does service the other developers in the community. Because it's CPD specific, I don't think it really is considering the other growth elements that are before us that we need to talk about, that are very impactful as well to the community. And I know there's also a conversation about, well, there's only 30 students in the Downs today, and that's kind of like the number people are kind of honing in on. When we met with our consultant and we talked about impacts to schools with development, I asked the question, well, what's the migration impact? If we're building all of these units and people are moving around the community, what about those students that come in where there's a person who was a single person living in a single family home who decides to move to the Downs and their house gets filled with 3 students that go to our schools? Where we had a school building committee yesterday where we talked about the projections because they're going to do another enrollment study. And part of those projections include migration within the community. Building more units and allowing for that migration will bring more students into the school. It's not necessarily in the Downs, but the Downs is part of that reality that because we're building more, people will move and those houses will get filled with families, with students. So there is a real impact to the schools as we decide on this project or any other project for multifamily units. So again, for me, again, I'm not opposed to finding a path forward. I really do want to find one. I think we can do it quickly. I'm not very happy with procedurally and process wise how we've been running all of this GMO business. So I won't support this tonight. And I actually would like to motion that we table this until we have a workshop to have a true conversation, align on the right path forward, and make sure that we can move this as quickly as possible. So my motion is to table this until we have a workshop.
So we have a motion to table. Not all counselors have been able to speak publicly about how they feel about this. Tony, would you call the roll on the tabling motion, please?
It doesn't have a
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there a second on table?
I'll second it.
Counselor Seider,
No.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
No.
Counselor Johnson,
No.
Counselor McGee,
Yes.
and Chairman Pucci.
No. Thank you. Any resuming discussion, any additional comments from
Yeah,
counselors?
I've got my hand up there, Mr. Chair.
I see, I was just about to
See that
say,
big yellow
Counselor
hand up
Johnson,
there?
please, go ahead.
Woo-hoo, you see that big
Mr.
yellow
No
hand?
Growth, what, tell
I
us.
haven't
Right.
gone
Thank
yet
you.
either, for the record,
Thank you.
Ken.
So much for the Hamel-Clucci idea. I'm gonna support this, and this is not an end run. I never even gave that some thought. This, just hear me out for 2 seconds. When the Scarborough Downs came into play through the CPD and purchased that land, there was an understanding, there was an agreement. It's a written, signed, approved agreement by prior councils. I was not on the council, but I'm somebody that honors past agreements, whether I agree or not. I'll just try to make them better for the time that I'm dealing with. But their understanding, and everybody's understanding that was engaged in the town, was that there were going to be 2,000 new homes in the Downs over 20 years. 1,800 to 2,000. Whether you like that or not, that's what the agreement and the understanding was. That's why these guys paid $7 million for the land, and they plowed about 40 million into the infrastructure. This year, the Downs has built 24 units all year. Here we are on the end of September, 24 units because of our GMO. So all the other folks that came up and talked about how the growth is running through, take a look at the results. I do believe we've had 84 homes built all year and 24 in the Downs. So I support this only to honor the agreement, because that's all this does. It will allow them, if you do the quick math, 1,800 to 2,000 homes over 20 years is 100 units a year. All this does is level set that and let them get back to that pace of 100 a year. That's all it does. It honors an agreement. Doesn't end run the GMO exemption. Doesn't do anything with public benefit. That could be a side discussion. I'm right now going to support this to honor an agreement, whether I agree with that agreement or not. And I think people sitting on this council ought to give that some thought. Because just because we inherit something we don't like, we can't disregard it. We can't rewrite it. We can't ignore it. We must honor it, because that's what we do. I yield back my time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Counselor Seider.
So taking into consideration the fact that I usually let everyone go before me, I'm very sensitive to what I'm hearing from council, that they feel like they got lost in this process. I've been on that side of a conversation and felt like the process wasn't clear to me, or that I would like more time for discussion. And so what I don't want to do is move forward with something in a way that a large minority, even if they are the minority of the council, is not comfortable with. That being said, I support the spirit of what we're trying to do here. We have got to find a path forward for granting some kind of increase in number of units. We've spent a very, very long time trying to muddle our way through an exemption process that doesn't have a clear path. I forget who said it, but at this point, we have multiple exemption requests. We have a new motion. Like there's a lot going on here, and I feel like there are a lot of loose ends kind of out in the community. I supported this upon reading it because I thought, okay, we'll put something in first reading and then the public will understand the process because this is a standard process that we follow. That being said, I'm not hearing that is how the rest of, or some of the members of council feel. And so is there a way that we can, I voted down the motion to table because I hadn't had a chance to talk. So is there a way that we can agree upon a path forward where we can set a special meeting or have a workshop between now and second reading to kind of hash out some of this conversation, to give the council an opportunity to have some of these conversations? And if that's not something that the people who are struggling with this want to support, that's fine. And we can just call the vote and that's fine. But I would like to see if we can come up with a solution that doesn't leave half of the people who've already spoken feeling really dissatisfied.
So I would be happy to schedule a workshop for next week, if that would help things. I need some feedback on, because I shared this out several weeks ago. I shared out also a 20-page version of something that the response that I've received initially, way too complicated, way too much to digest. Now this one's so simple, it's too complicated. It's too much for the public to understand. I think Ken said it best. We committed to allowing 2,000 units over 20 years in this development. It's in our comp plan. We rewrote the GMO and we slashed that to no more than 44 a year after the initial exemption. We need to remedy that situation. We hoped when we passed the GMO that it would happen through the exemption process, but what we found is that is not going to happen. I don't know that this council or any council is ever going to issue a town council exemption. I think we can set parameters through ordinance that defines the level of growth that the community is willing to accept, that's consistent with prior commitments that we've made. But that's my perspective. We're here. We've had at least 5 workshops on this. I have never stopped anybody from stating their piece or stating how they feel about something. If you want to have another workshop next week, we can have another workshop. I'm happy to do it. And you can, Councilor Anderson, if you want to coordinate it, that's fine. We're not trying to do anything behind the scenes or out of the public purview. What I feel a little bad about is this did come on an agenda. It's published. The intent of it is to schedule a public hearing so that the public can come and tell us what they think about the idea. And sidestepping that process, I think, causes more confusion than anything else. And I think it's just, it's a bit disingenuous. Councilor Hamel.
We can't blame the public for where we are with these pending motions, these pending exemptions. We cannot blame the public for that, nor can we ask them to solve it for us. That is absurd. The only way we're going to fix this is by working through it ourselves and by voting to move it ahead to the next step and then see how this does. And then we'll regroup, suggesting that is somehow going to resolve the issues that we've had close to a year, almost a year now, with an initial exemption that was contingent on, on a downtown concept. If we don't try to unravel that somehow, that will be donging us indefinitely. We're not going to be able to do it in one workshop. I'm sorry. Let's be realistic. So I think we take the time to pause and to work our way through this and get an answer to whatever happened to the authorization that we gave the town manager to negotiate this on our behalf. What happened to that? That's still pending. Okay. You heard that from the person who requested it. We can't move forward this way. We've got to work back through what's still pending, unravel it and push the reset button. One workshop, there's no hope of this being resolved in one workshop.
Well, and I think that's where, generally, we're going to disagree on this one as a council, and I think it's going to be, a bit tight. I don't think any level of process is going to stop that. What I think some process will do is help explain to the public why we're voting for where we are and receive feedback.
I still don't understand how we got from a super majority to a simple majority. Okay, I still do not understand that. And I didn't just fall off the Rutabaga truck.
So our procedures are dictated by the charter. The charter says that the council requires it can only act through orders, ordinances, resolutions. The charter says that 4 votes are required to do any of those. We can repeal our entire zoning ordinance with 4 votes. That's just the way that it is. It may be scary to some, but that's our form of government. Councilor Anderson.
So just again, procedurally, my understanding was anytime an applicant comes forward, the way that application would get memorialized is through an adjustment to the GMO that requires a simple majority or requires a super majority. So the way this amendment has come forward, and even in the packet, it states because we've been getting these applications and we need to address these applications. So I really, really would like a legal opinion on your interpretation of the charter and our policies, the process we've set up with the GMO, and really get clarity on whether or not a supermajority is legally required to move this forward or not, because I don't see how we've gotten to this point, even with the specific recommendation of the 289 units, which was specific to their application, where we could say that that's not a result of the GMO exemption process that's outlined in the ordinance. So maybe we've created some challenges that we didn't predict, but legally, I really question, given the genesis of this amendment and where it came from, whether we could stand behind legally and say that we're not following 413. And
I would be happy to request that of the town attorney. And I think there's another point that's important here, that the council right now, we're deliberating as a council, as municipal officers, about our ordinances, what should be the law. When we receive an application for a GMO, we're supposed to be reviewing that application similar to a planning board for conformance with the law and the standards that we set forth. In that process, the applicant has due process rights. They have right to be heard, and for us to render a decision based on the facts that are before us. We muddled that process remarkably through the past year. Okay, so I appreciate the applicant's patience and their willingness to withdraw and reset in exchange for us saying, hey, we're not going to put you out of business tomorrow. You're a good part of the community, and we're going to let you keep going. That's all this is. Now, so I don't mind requesting that of Phil, and I'm sure he'd be happy to do it. I'm fully confident that I know how to read the charter, or that I have. But he can explain it better than I can. I have no doubt of that. Councilor Caterina.
Yeah, and I appreciate, everyone comes from different places with this, which is fine. And I would definitely support, we can do a workshop next week. Malarkey, I haven't heard that word since my father passed away in 2011, Mr. Hamill. It's good Irish.
You're welcome.
Anyway.
Trying to keep it light.
It's not malarkey to move something to the public for public hearing. And don't get me going, because I don't want to go down the conflict of interest road. Okay, so just chill. Oh, yeah. Okay. Anyway, so I would be, I would like to see us vote, and you don't all have to, but I'd like to see 4 of us vote. Move it, at least move it out. Have a workshop next week. Then bring it up for the public hearing and second reading. You can split the public hearing from the second reading. I mean, you can do the public hearing separately and put a second reading even further down the road if you wanted to. But this is crazy. We keep spinning our wheels over all sorts of, it's like, we've gotten lost and I don't know what, this is crazy.
I think that's a key point of the process as well, is you invite the public to respond. But then as a council, if you want to then table or adjourn, you don't have to take action at that next meeting. If you require additional information or anything else, that's at the will of the council. All this is it's introducing an idea, which any counselor is welcome to do. Receiving your feedback, and we're obviously split. Let's hear from the public. And then as a council, we need to decide what the next step is going to be. Councilor McGee.
Hi, just clarifying. What's our workshop on? The 800 exemption requests, the 297 exemption request, or the GMO modification?
So what would you like to have a workshop on? I guess is how I'm going to respond it, because I'm
Don't you think
offering
that
it in
all of them
response to-
should be addressed at some point?
I'd like to add to that one, if I may. Whatever happened to the real reason for why this was delayed for so long is that you didn't have a supermajority and you weren't willing to bring it to a vote to get it voted down. Okay, that was the real reason.
Yes.
It's
So,
just-
I mean, are we aligned on a workshop or not? Because I'm not hearing any movement from honestly, from anybody.
Yes,
The workshop
I think
is,
we need a clearly we need a workshop. So yes, we need a workshop. We need, we need something. Well, I mean, I think this is all like, again, the thing that frustrates me the most about this process is in July, we all agreed transparency was critical and we have not been doing that. Transparency
that's your
means
perspective,
meeting.
John.
Yes, it is my perspective and I can, at the workshop, we can
I'll stand
discuss.
by my action.
That's fine, and we can discuss where I see your actions as not being transparent. But I will say, the problem is that we're not talking with each other. We're not aligning on policy objectives. What we're doing is we're focusing on getting something done as quickly as we can without really thinking about the impact. I think getting together as a group, really aligning on what are our objectives, what are we trying to do? Where does your recommendation fit into that at this time? Where does a bigger full-scale GMO update fit into that? And just really make sure we're clear on what we're doing, because we've gone so many different directions, so many different paths. Part of transparency is clarity. And I think, not to say, I'm not claiming anybody's not being transparent necessarily,
You
but
just did though.
well, I mean, the way this process has been going, it's been, we get emails, we get little snippets here. I get
But to be
a
fair,
personal
John,
email.
There's no yes, no matter what, from you, right? I mean,
No,
you wrote an op-ed in the paper
no,
that you,
I've said-
no, regardless
said-
of what.
I said in the paper, which I will be happy to read, I said, I'm not supportive of the exemption process. I'm not supportive of the initial application that came forward. I am supportive of finding a path forward for the Downs. I think that can be done. And I'm willing to find a way to do that as a council. And I don't feel like we're doing that. We're not working as a council. It's clearly 4 people, honestly, at this point, who want to move this forward and circumvent the processes we've tried to establish with a supermajority. And again, you guys can do that if you want to. That's fine. I just don't think that's, good government. I think that lacks some integrity, to be honest. And that's not something I'm very supportive and proud of right now, being on this council.
Mr. Chair. I just like.
So
I'm tempted to call the question. Now, you notice I said I'm tempted.
I know you tempted. I'm looking around. I think I was about to as well. Go ahead.
I am disappointed that the conversation is kind of devolving. I don't want to name call or be unkind to each other. That's not necessary. But I have historically voted at first reading in favor of something to advance a conversation and then voted no at second reading. I literally just did it. So for the record, that would not be out of character for me, and it's not about integrity for me. I want a solution that we can, I don't, if we disagree, we disagree, that's fine. But I do want there to be a process that we can agree on that makes everyone feel comfortable. John put out a
proposal. To me, it's no different than accepting a submission request from a private entity that we need to discuss. So we're discussing what John put forward. I don't see why that can't be part of a workshop now. We have 3 things we need to discuss as part of a workshop. As far as I'm concerned, we need to discuss the relevance of the first application we received. We need to discuss the relevance of the second application we received as it pertains to what John is now proposing. I don't think that having that conversation publicly and scheduling a workshop and admitting that we are all getting a little tangled and that we would all like to discuss the different ends that we have going is not following a process. I think we're trying to lay out a process for having these conversations. And I just don't, I guess I'm a little taken aback by some of the fire, for lack of a better word, at just trying to find a way to have these conversations. I think that this is just as viable a path forward as anything else we've tried, to me.
I'm trying to propose a solution. I'm always open to entertaining others' proposals for solutions. That's all this is. And we're doing it in public and it's messy and that's just how it is.
One option we haven't discussed and we used it one time. We used an executive session when we kicked off this entire journey on the first exemption. Okay, that's still live. Okay, we had an executive session. And guess what an executive session allows you to do? It allows you to air grievances, in a very direct way. It allows you to, and please let me finish, okay? And then you can try to correct me later. We haven't used that. And that's one example of something that's an opportunity for us to discuss together as a council and not in groups of 2 or 3, what we're dealing with. I suggest we don't make any move forward before we get an opinion, a legal opinion from our attorney on exactly where we stand as a council and as a town in terms of dealing with this. It's quite clear that the folks that are, that have put these exemptions forward are doing it in a certain way, that they're obviously giving some thought to that. If we don't take the time to do that, and perhaps even in an executive session do that, then I think we would not be prepared to have a workshop, and we would not be in any shape to resolve anything in a single workshop.
Yes. No, I'd be happy to do an executive session with the attorney before second reading.
I suggest we start with that, with their opinion, gives us an opportunity to talk directly and, without confusing the public and to try to get our own ducks in a row. And then we go from there. I'm open. I'm pretty much, agnostic as it relates to whatever process we follow after that. I'm just very, very skeptical of it all happening in one workshop.
I see your hand, Councilor McGee.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess the way I'm gonna take this tonight is you're basically just asking for a GMO ordinance change, and that's what you're asking us for.
That's
as
what I'm
a separate
proposing.
issue. And I understand that everyone here seems a little bit frustrated because we have intertwined the issues and the numbers have aligned perfectly. But if it was a GMO ordinance request change to make it 300 units are exempted in the CPD, didn't align exactly with their exemption request. But if that was the number and said, it would look a little bit better. But regardless, we're here. I do think that it would have helped for future reference to have some of the workshops. And I think the big miss here is that I don't think any of you realize, like, I think there's actually a path forward. And had we had a workshop, you would probably have heard me say, I understand the importance of the downtown to that community, to our community, and the overall big picture. And I think there's a path forward. We never did it.
We had a workshop at our last meeting specifically on that.
It was an introduction of their proposal. But anyways, I think Jean Marie's ready for hers.
What was the question?
Very, very good. I'm going to call the vote, please.
Okay. As presented, public hearing and second reading,
Correct. There's been no amendments. Yeah.
Councilor Sider.
Can I ask a question? Can you please clarify what we're voting on?
Yeah,
I
I
do
can read
not
the vote. That's
understand
fine.
what we're
Point of
voting
order.
on.
Yes.
Thank you.
So first reading and scheduled public hearing and second reading on the proposed amendments to to chapter 413, Town of Scarborough Growth Management Ordinance. And I can read the specific, it's one page. I don't know if we can bring it up on the screen. I'll read it once it comes up. So specifically and maybe we can make it a little bigger. It's to amend section 6 exemptions as follows. And the amendments are in red and blue. So we would strike a maximum of 70 dwelling units and change that to 100 and scratch the expiration date of 2022 and make that 2024. That's for units within the Crossroads Plans Development District. The other change is outside of the Crossroads Planned Development District. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I did it wrong. So that was outside of the Crossroad Planned Development District for multifamily dwellings that are 1 bedroom or smaller. The second part is inside of the Crossroads Planned Development District. We're going to scratch the 104 that was issued at the time the ordinance was rewritten and amend it with the 289 and the expiration date of 2000 and it's going to go to 2025 and it was 2021.
So this was the original motion you had on the agenda.
This is
That
what was
that
included
was
in
an
the
attempt to
packet,
table
and this is
that.
what we are voting on. Yes.
Okay, so that, and then the other
As
attempt
a
to
first
table.
reading to schedule a public hearing and second reading on
Right.
this.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now we can call the roll. Thank you.
Counselor Seibert,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
No.
Counselor Hamel,
No.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor McGee,
No.
and Chairman Pucci.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-3. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Quick
Next,
question, process question, if I may, point of information. So this is for the first reading. We still have a public hearing and a second reading on this.
we scheduled a public hearing to invite the public to tell us what they think and a second reading.
And there's no workshop at this point, nothing. That's the only
I'm
step that
offering
we
that
have.
up. If you guys want to have a workshop, I'm fine having a workshop next week.
I'd
And
vote in
I'm
favor of a
seeing a lot of
week-long
heads nod.
workshop. And I also offered the idea of an executive session with a.
I am fine
request-
doing that prior to the next meeting as well.
But I
I'll work
wrap
with-
that all into one gigantic one.
We did not, I'm just making a commitment on that. We did not, that was not part of what we just voted on.
Vote on it.
Okay, now moving on to order number 22-092, first reading and scheduled public hearing on the proposed amendments to chapter 1301, the general assistance ordinance pursuant to title 22 MRSA 4305/4. This is your baby, right?
Sure, yeah. So just briefly, on an annual basis, the GA maximums and thresholds are updated by DHHS. And as part of the model GA ordinance that we adopt, we're obligated to take affirmative action to adopt those new maximums. Very little change. I can certainly give some more detailed information at the next meeting, should the council desire any. Most notable change is a increase in the electricity rates, just reflecting the increase in utility costs, just more generally. Other than that, they're just updating the regular figures, as part of a process we do every year.
Are there any members of the public that would like to speak to this item? Seeing none, do I have a motion
So moved.
Second.
and discussion? Seeing none, would you call the roll, please?
Counselor Seibert,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor McGee.
Yes.
And Chairman Pucci.
Yes.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Next is order number 22-093, act on the request from the fire chief to accept a grant from the Assistance to Firefighters Grant in an amount of $65,045.45 to replace ropes and technical rescue gear. And thank you for staying with us the entire meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Just to give you a quick background, I would be remiss, and with your permission, I would just like to recognize my entire command staff is now in place. The transition is complete. And they were told they didn't have to come, but they all wanted to come and see the council and just see what the experience was. So thank you.
Thank you for
Well,
coming.
I'm glad
You're welcome.
We don't disappoint.
But I'm super proud to have them here with me, and I'm proud to be able to bring some good news, some free money to you for your consideration to approve. This grant was put in back when Chief Thurlow and Deputy Chief Lamoria, prior to their retirement, they put this in back in 2001. And this grant will be used to replace some aging equipment that after 10 years ages out, and the NFPA recommends replacing that stuff. The $65,000 grant amount, 10% of that will be our share, which has already been planned into. We were pretty certain we were going to be successful in this grant, so we planned for the match within our operational budget. So the impact will be very small at $6,500 to get all our technical rescue gear for rope rescue, technical abilities to make rescues that we need to, will be able to be replaced without any taxpayer burden, any huge taxpayer burden. Is there any questions? Happy to answer.
No, this sounds awesome.
One of the things I did want to add, the town of Scarborough has been a benefit from the Assistance to Firefighters grant. I tried to get a final number. I worked with Chief Thurlow. I think we're over $2 million over the 2 decades that they've been putting in grants that this town has received from the Assistance to Firefighters grant. That's taken that burden off the taxpayers.
Fantastic. Thank you. Any questions? from the chief? Seeing none, any members of the public would like to speak to this? Free money?
Good thing.
Seeing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Yeah.
Second.
And discussion? Seeing none, thank you all for coming and for doing this.
Thank you very much,
Welcome.
gentlemen.
We owe you a debt of gratitude. Tony, would you call the roll, please?
Counselor Seiber,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson.
Yes.
Yes.
Katarina.
Yes.
Counselor Johnson. Counselor Johnson. Counselor McGee.
Yes, you might be on
and
mute.
Chairman Clucci.
Yes. Counselor Johnson, are you there? Okay, we must have lost him. Next is order number 22-094. Act on the request from the Communication Committee to approve the topic for the next Council Corner Live relating to traffic and transportation. And this is coming to us from the Communications Committee. Counselor Anderson, would you like to introduce this?
So again, we've decided the third Thursday every other month, we would try and have a Counselor Corner Live. At the last committee meeting, we talked about 2 topics, traffic and transportation and financial management, fiscal policies of the town. And I think we decided to recommend traffic and transportation for discussion tonight. If there's something else that anybody else would prefer, we're open to other ideas, but that just seems timely and relevant given all of the conversations that we've been having that all kind of stem back to growth. So felt like this one might be a good next topic.
Okay. Any members of the public like to speak to this? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And discussion?
Could I just ask a question? I know Liam has been a support, plays a support role for this, and I certainly encourage him to continue doing that. As these get to be perhaps more technical, I just wonder what the level of staff involvement is in these. I'd prefer having very light touch, if that's at all possible. I mean, I think the intent of this is really to be a conversation. To the extent there's information that's your questions raised and information to be provided, we're pleased to follow up in some other form. That works.
Yeah, I won't speak for John necessarily. You're the chair of communications, but I find these sessions to be more valuable when it's just the counselors. I mean, obviously we rely on Liam to be there for support and help me run the owl. But I really think that the origin of these sessions was not to have the public come and get their questions answered by staff. It was to have the public come and speak to counselors in a relaxed setting. So I agree that staff support is not.
That's excellent. What I would
necessary.
ask though is there a feedback loop? Presumably you're getting input and I just wonder how staff can help support you.
Oh, sure.
As you go forward. Maybe that's something the committee can talk about.
Yeah, I think we've been handling it so far that, you know, for example, we did one on conservation and sustainability issues. Jamie did attend. But, you know, we then made a list of topics that we could talk about at committee. And so that was kind of how we
This point is
incorporated
let us
that.
know how we can help.
Thank you.
After you collect input.
Come on up. Please.
Nina McKee, 309 Black Point Road. It occurs to me, this is really, I appreciate so much this conversation about the downs and the exemption, and it is so confusing. It is really confusing. And I would like to learn more, and I would like to enlighten myself. Maybe I won't be so negative about the downs. I really need to know. And it's so all these figures that have gone through months, and you know, and I'm just wondering if possibly the council would be able to have a council corner on on this situation, and not necessarily have, you know, it's, you know, just what has happened over these months, and have let questions be asked, and, you know, just to have some more understanding. I really appreciate, John, what you have said, and I'm right there. I mean, it's very confusing. And I think as the public, if we know more and through education, we would be much more supportive. And I'm open to learning. So I would suggest maybe, and I think the traffic is fine, but I think the real meat of the problem is the exemption and what's happening to growth and the downs and stuff. So thank you for letting me speak. Thank you.
I'm glad that I did. Why not?
Case to stay late. It's past my bedtime. I am a senior. Thank you,
You were
Richard
here early
Hayes,
too, so.
21 Martin Avenue in Scarborough. First off, my first comment is, I would be against executive session to discuss something that is very much should be in the public view. Secondly, I respect the folks who currently live in the Downs are all excited about seeing it expand. I wonder how excited they would be if the burden of payment for all of what's happening in the Downs was borne solely by them. Martin Avenue is not, it's close to the Soft Broad Turn Road. Our town manager knows where it is. I can't walk and will not walk to anything that happens at the town center. I do respect that the fact if there's 2,000 or 3,000 people there, they're all excited about being walking. And again, I just would say, you know, think of the whole town, that while we could drive there, could also drive many other places. And I probably would not drive to a location where I might be running into 2,000 or 3,000 people. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. So back to I think those are relevant comments. So we have one that I looked up, you're scheduling this for October 21st on transportation. I mean, is there an appetite, or did you discuss as a committee doing one on the Downs? Is that no, you didn't discuss it, or no appetite?
We did not discuss it at this one. We did discuss it at ones in the past. I think even at our July workshop, we had discussed potentially doing the counselor corner at some point on growth. I think it was, I don't know why we didn't do it when we had the one that we recently had, but I think it was more because of timing, because we weren't sure what the process was for dealing with the GMO. So we felt like we should push that out until we had more clarity. But given the conversation tonight, I feel like if anybody wants to motion to amend to change the topic, I think we can surely use the meeting in October to have the discussion on the exemption if somebody wants to motion for that.
Can you restate that for me?
So we talked about it in the past. We always were looking for the right opportunity. After tonight's conversation, maybe the 21st is the right opportunity. I think we can keep it with traffic and transportation. That's what's before us. If somebody feels strongly and wants to amend the topic so that we can discuss it, I would say go ahead and motion to amend if you're interested. Again, it's up to the council.
I just have a comment. It's we did one on just growth in general, and it really kind of just evolved into a discussion about the downs. So I kind of feel like that was there already and covered. I think the idea of talking about traffic and transportation is a good one to have coming up next. I would also recommend the I'm angry, need to vent Counselor Corner Live. Just a complete grab bag of people screaming at us. I think would be awesome.
That's what I'm going for.
Well, this particular topic, the reason why I brought it forward was because the transportation committee felt like this would be a good topic to discuss, and they were willing to sponsor it. I think the best one that we did have was when the sustainability committee kind of sponsored the topic, and that was the one that I think was best at not getting into the downs conversation, because all of these somehow find a way to get to that topic. So I think, and even this one, it would likely come up without it being specific to it. So again, I think this is a good topic, at least to keep the conversation going. But, again, we brought this forward because we didn't really have a strong topic that we all felt strongly about to vote on. And so, again, we want you guys to provide input as well. Like, what are the things you would want to hear from the public? We're proposing traffic and transportation, but if there's something else, we're happy to accommodate.
Can I ask, it's just a question about how many people attend these and how many of them are different people each time, or is it the same people attending?
I would say if it's a topic that people are interested in, they'll attend. I think some of our ones recently maybe weren't as.
We've had really good success. I mean, we packed the house the first time,
What was that?
That was the
topic?
growth.
the growth one.
And what do you mean by pack the house?
We literally filled chamber B, had to bring in more chairs.
30
Um,
people, plus a
yeah.
lot online. It was
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
turn.
Yeah.
all right.
Sustainability and conservation, I would say, was around 30.
Oh, okay, so you've got fairly good turn.
Yeah, and there was some overlap.
Yeah.
We have some people who attend them all. And then most recently, we did public benefit, and that was the first one that we've had with kind of low numbers.
And the reason I asked is just
Sure.
because I can't hear me go, person who's been around the longest. They weren't that well attended, and they were the same people all the time. So I was curious with this, what's going on now, if that's making a difference.
I mean,
Yeah, that hasn't been our experience so
Okay.
far.
and the goal is to try and get
Still new.
topics that people are interested in coming to,
Right.
right? And so that's
Right,
where,
that makes a difference.
people say traffic and transportation is the #1 issue. So hopefully
Right.
that topic, somebody's gonna have something to say about something.
Right.
So that's why we're trying to have
Yeah.
something that can hopefully draw.
And everyone
Different
has a
people.
personal experience. They don't need to be a traffic engineer. They know what they know. So. I think-
I would say, just from my perspective, the 21st feels far away to have a conversation about the exemption. Just a lot can change between now and then. So my preference would probably be to stick with traffic and
I'm on board
transportation.
with traffic.
Yeah, me too.
I was just gonna say, I think one of the things we've talked about, and certainly not, staff's role, that this is a council initiative, but I think that we've tried to target subjects that were a little bit more not subjective, but kind of more nebulous, rather than be a specific conversation about a very specific topic. And so general feelings about these various subjects, I think has been sort of the vision, so it doesn't devolve into a debate or whatever that looks like. I think it's just sort of, what are your thoughts on conservation, sustainability? What does that mean to you? What's important? What do you want us to hear? I agree, growth. The first one really did, kind of go into very quickly a conversation about the downs and GMO and things like that. All of them are gonna kind of, I think, head that way. It's sort of the massive object, that the gravity is just, everything is being pulled to that. So even traffic and transportation inevitably is going to be a discussion about growth and the downs. So I guess my comments would be, I don't know what that vehicle is for the council to get feedback. You know, obviously there have been discussions tonight about workshops, Counselor Corner Live. So I don't know what that forum is, but clearly to Nick's point, hopefully it turned to Counselor McGee's point, hopefully it turns into something more productive than just a screaming match. But there clearly is a need for education, understanding, and a path forward and an ability for the public to respond to that. So those are just my comments.
Yeah, and I'd say connection. I know when I started on the council, there was a couple of sessions. I forget what we called them at the time, but it was just a roundtable. Yeah, it was literally just us.
Right.
And maybe one resident.
Yeah.
Or two. So you've done a good job driving engagement, and I think it could be that it's beneficial. So, any further discussion? Sounds like we're going to move approval as written, as proposed. Any further discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Counselor Snyder,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor McGee.
Yes.
And Chairman Clucci.
Yes.
Unanimous, thank you.
We have no non-action items. I'm going to combine items 10 and 11, standing and special committee reports and liaison reports and council member comments. Counselor Scyther.
So finance met yesterday. We had an agenda item to begin discussions of reviewing our fiscal policy. What the direction I proposed and was well received by the committee was that we will have a future discussion at our October meeting where we really take a deep dive into our fiscal policy. And the mechanism for doing that we agreed upon was we're going to create a shared doc that's going to be open to the council to go in and make comments so that staff has those comments and questions ahead of time, just to make for a more productive conversation. But the intent being that, you know, anything that anybody would like to say about the fiscal policy, you know, we're gonna really go page by page and do a comprehensive discussion of that policy. So that's what's coming up in finance. I think that's all.
Counselor Anderson.
So at communications committee, and I sent an email out to everybody about this, we did further talk that notion of a canvas day, targeting 2 weekends in October, where again, the objective would be to go door to door to try and get people to sign up for the e-news, but time that with the special election edition of the e-news that's going to go out, so that we could really try and use that as an opportunity to go knock on doors, get them to sign up so that they get all the stuff that's going to be on the municipal ballot after they sign up. So again, the hope is two counselors would pair up together over the weekend of the 17th and the 24th, maybe knock on 50 doors together and just kind of try and get people to sign up and excited. So again, that's a recommendation by the committee. I just want to see, is there interest in doing something like that before we start really planning, or no appetite by the council to do anything like that? Counselor Scyther wanted me to say we're doing it, but I figured
we can hear from Jean Marie and then I'll.
I mean, I think Counselor Scyther, yeah, you should go out on the doors because you are technically on the ballot. But other than that, no, I'm just picking on you. I have real mixed feelings about it, and I love doors. I love talking to people, doing doors and whatever. However, my concern is I would not want anything that we do to be confused in the minds of constituents that we're out there pushing the library for support. We're pushing that for support. You know what I'm saying? I think it's fraught with some potential misreading by constituents. Also, people are going to be really tired of people knocking on their doors because, you know, you do have the gubernatorial, you've got this canvassing going out all the time with politicals. So I'm not wild about it, but that's my opinion.
I kind of line up with Jean Marie on this, not surprisingly, but we did this, I think, as part of a canvassing effort to talk to new voters. Actually went around with April. We had a lovely afternoon. knocking on doors, but it wasn't like a pending ballot. It was in the future. So I think there's a risk with this one because there's a very fine line. You know, if there's a pirouette, you can do it, but it's like, I'm speaking now as a personal, this is my personal opinion, blah, blah. You got to do a disclaimer. So and especially if we're going to be circulating materials, like at one point in time, we were going to be leafleting, there's a possibility of us handing out the library newsletter. I think that is clearly, you're distributing something that we said we'd let the voters decide. Now we're out there telling them what to decide. So it's tricky for me this time around.
Maybe making it election focused maybe isn't the best approach, but just the notion of knocking on doors and getting people to sign up for e-news, like.
I think if you draw the line there, you're fine. Yeah, but I
I think
think,
for that.
yeah, I think you're still gonna, I love doing doors. So I do them for any occasion, but this is a little tricky.
Because we don't have the details ironed out. I think the intent was we just feel like there's an opportunity for the council to like get out there, do something, and Allison offered to kind of figure out some campaign around it. And we're like, well, maybe the election would work.
How about after the election?
It could be after the election. It doesn't-
Or in the spring, or you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
To
Where it's not tied to an election.
an undemonize ourselves effort there.
Yeah.
Might be.
Well, we can keep the idea in the good idea box. I know Liam and Allison had a lot of other good ideas that they were starting to share. And, we said maybe we can kind of continue to fine tune those and for the next committee, they can kind of figure out what's worth bringing forward.
Yeah, Councilor Anderson, I think you punted those to the next committee in January. So
Yeah.
loud and clear. I will hold back on our ideas. moving
That
forward.
good idea box.
Can we read the good idea box? I love that.
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
Along the lines of trying to like get people on the e-news, is there anything like when you go register your vehicle, like, hey, would you like to sign up and learn more about the town?
Yeah, we
Like,
do that.
is it pushed like at the counter though? No.
Staff isn't
It's
having
there.
that conversation. We do have little hand cards around town hall. But I don't think staff is consistently engaging public in that.
I know in our office, when we know somebody's new to the area, like they come in to register to vote, we'll hand them one of the cards. And usually they fill it out there and I put it in the box for Allison to put them in the system. So, or they take them with them.
Have we offered $1 off their tax bill? in exchange for an email address?
Council Caterina. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Just one more quickly. The school board, we had the building committee yesterday. And at the building committee, one of the things that they went over was the timeline, and they kind of said, we started this process in February. It was a 20-month timeline. They showed us where we are and we're right where we're supposed to be in order for this to get on ballot by November 23. So according to their timeline, they are on track and things are lining up for them to definitely get on the ballot. And when I brought up with the architect that there was, concern that that's really not feasible, the glare she gave us when I made that statement, she was like, it's certainly feasible and it's going to happen. So again, like, I just want to make sure this council is prepared that this is definitely coming. The things that they're doing and where they're at least today, they're on track for that November 23rd ballot.
Do they have land yet?
Their goal was to have site selection complete in the next 2 months. If they can stay on track for that, then they will. Yeah, they will be on track to get to a November ballot.
That's the key to me is, where?
Yeah.
Do they understand that the council needs to approve it going on the ballot?
Yes, they get that. They know the council has to approve it to get on the ballot. And again, I think with the library stuff happening right now, I think it's giving us the opportunity to kind of share what worked, what didn't work, and learn from that, I think, a little bit better. Because again, I think, except for maybe Jean Marie, maybe you too, John, none of us really went through a big major capital project like that, like the public safety building. So I feel like there's a little bit of like with the library kind of learning. We've all learned. I think, yeah, we will all be here November 23, or at least to get it to that point if the project stays on path. So like, how do we apply some of the learnings from the library that we want to try and do better with this project and make sure we're relaying that to the committee? I think will be helpful for Councilor Scyther and I. We also talked about, because of the finance committee, the need to determine what's the right path forward, or how do we get the number included in the CIP, which clearly has been a point of concern raised by the public or by even some of the counselors. And so I think that's an open question that we would like to explore. And I think the school has been exploring even before we had the conversation. I think they had already had some of that conversation. So again, there might be something coming forward about figuring out how do we amend the CIP to include that number. And then lastly, committee, non-committee, I just want to apologize because I was frustrated earlier. I may have said some things that maybe were personal that I didn't mean to be, especially to you, John. So I apologize if I said anything, but I am just frustrated. I like that we'll have a path forward. Happy to work with you on figuring out if we have a workshop next week, what do we do? How do we work on it? So again, just apologize if I said or did anything that offended you or anyone else.
And likewise, and please put together an outline for the workshop. You know, whatever concerns you have that you want to address or cover, let's make a go of it. And we'll check availability, obviously, with everybody, but we're going to target. I know we kick the zoning board of appeals out every time we do an off cycle, but we'll coordinate and recognize that Tom is shorthanded right now in that area, and I have no skills whatsoever in that area. Councilor Katarina.
So you want an update on? I'm going. Well, I'm
We
supposed to go to
are in
Augusta tomorrow, but
standing
I-
in special committee.
Yeah, so I thought I had to go to Augusta tomorrow, but I just got a Zoom link, so I guess I don't have to drive all the way to Augusta. I haven't decided which way I'll go, but Maine Municipal Legislative Policy Committee. And I know it sounds funny to have us meet because usually we meet to talk about legislation that's pending, and obviously there's nothing out there yet because we've got elections and whatnot. However, just so you'll know, our policy goals are to protect the core, which is considering the constitutional backstop obligating legislature to fund only 50% of lost property tax revenue. And that they're making promises to fully reimburse municipalities for overly generous tax breaks, i.e. the senior freezing property. That's why I asked the question I asked. So that's one of the big things that we're going to start working on. Home rule being eroded by the legislature. That was like in that LD 2003, where they were going to tell us where we were going to build things. And it was like, whoa, wait a minute, hold on a minute. Broadband, that's not so much us as other parts of the state are desperate still to get broadband. Housing, what are we going to do to help with housing? Solid waste, which is an issue throughout the state. PFAS, which is that chemical. And what's interesting is Senator Stacey Brenner. Hopefully she'll get reelected. And I know I'm making a plug that's political here, and I'm sorry, but that's the way it goes. She's been real big on that. Stop rolling your eyes, Dawn. We're making it. We're making.
I voted.
Oh, good. Thank you. She's the chair of the committee that deals with that. And she's done some national stuff with it. So we've got a homegrown person on that. And then obviously tax stabilization. So that's what we will be working on. And that's all I had to say.
Enjoy your day.
Oh, I know it's all day too. It's like.
Any other updates?
Quick update on ordinance. We met a Thursday or so ago, and we'll be bringing forward at some point charging stations, for electric vehicles. That's going through a couple of other turns to get more input from contractor community and others. And then there are two things that are going to be coming from the waterfront committees. The one that's pretty much ready for prime time is the Coastal Waters and Harbor Committee has developed and updated their ordinance. So that'll be, ready probably in a month or so. There's another one, the Shellfish Commission ordinance has been updated. There is, however, one particular aspect of that where they're interested in trying to change the resident license holders to give them the opportunity to become non-resident license holders. It's something that has been done in Freeport and also in Brunswick to try to address the issue of increasing difficulties with affordability of housing for people that are trying to make their living from digging clams. So that one is going to require us to hear from the folks that are putting it forward, and we're trying to get Robert Willett and probably the chair of the Shellfish Committee, Nate, or to do another committee turn on that with us in ordinance. So those two things. Thanks.
Okay. I think we're covered. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
And I'm gonna go all those in favor. Sorry, Tony. Raise your hand, Ken, shout out. Good night,
He
Ken.
raised his hand.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Night.
All right, we
Night,
are
Ken.
adjourned. Thank you, everybody.